Meeting to order. My name is Joe McGivern. I am Chair of the Holyoke City Council's Finance Committee. We have a short but very important agenda this evening. Present for committee members besides myself to my left is our Vice Chair, Kevin Jordan. Via Zoom is Councilor at Large Peter Tallman. We will be the three voting members this evening. We also have City Councilor Linda Vacan present with us via Zoom, and City Councilor Tessa Murphy-Ramboletti present via Zoom. This meeting is being televised live. We will be Zoomed and recorded, and we also are being streamed live. With that in mind, because we are hybrid, we will be doing some more than usual votes by roll call per state law. But the chair will entertain a motion that we adopt the universal law that our routine votes can be done up front with a voice vote, with a roll call vote, and then be done, motion to table, motion to take off the table, via just one vote. So
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Motion made and seconded. That has to be a quick roll call. Councilor Jordan?
Yes.
Councilor Tallman?
Yes.
And Councilor McGivern? Yes. Thank you. With that in mind, I believe we can go to item number one.
I'd like to make a motion to remove item number 1 from the table.
Motion made second to remove item 1 from the table. This is introduced under my name on behalf of the mayor and our department head, Aaron Vega, who is present with us, that we accept Mass General Laws 44, Section 53A, that the City Council accepts the provisions of the 2022 MassTrails Grant $50,000, $12,500 match through the Cannabis Impact Stabilization Fund, and grant authorizes the establishment of fund and any other appropriate method for the accounting of the receipts and expenditures. Being off the table for discussion, we welcome Aaron Vega. Aaron, come on in and have a seat, please. And I know you know how to work those mics. Thank you for coming down. Can you walk us through the match and the grant itself?
Absolutely, and I also just, if it's the will of the body to maybe take item number 2 up, I believe is actually or we can do them separate.
Are they related to each other?
I think 2 is the actual ask to take the money from the stabilization.
Oh, okay, yeah, I'll make a motion to remove item 2 from the table as well.
Second that.
Motion made second to remove item 2 from the table for discussion and eventual vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So
Aye.
moved. Aaron?
Thank you. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for taking this up. I believe all of you have received, it's also online, so if you haven't received, the preliminary work done for the first MassTrails Grant that was received. You must have approved it maybe the end of 2019 or very beginning of 2020, because I came on board and they were doing the interviews and Niche Engineering was brought on as the consultant. Great group to work with, and we have some great feasibility study. So as I continue to learn, we now have about $100,000 feasibility study paid for from the first MassTrails Grant. And as the process goes, this next grant would get us to about a 15% design. Then we would apply for a second grant next year, hopefully get to a 25% design. If the mayor feels that this is an important project, then we would work with MassDOT to put it on the tip. What is this project? This project is looking at Main Street from the Route 5 beginning to Springdale Park. Part of the impetus of starting this work was because Route 5 is on the tip, I think for 2025 or 2026, I'm not quite sure, but the thought was with the former city engineer and others, why don't we try to capitalize on work being done on Route 5 and try to continue that work? So that was impetus for the start. Of course, we know that this section of Main Street could definitely use some attention. Where we are today, as we look at this second phase, we believe on multiple levels that we need to start utilizing the Cannabis Impact Fee money. And this is exactly in line with the kind of work that should be done with this kind of money when it comes to planning and infrastructure. As you know, the Main Street corridor is an essential corridor from the southern portion of the city into the Flats downtown area. It connects Holyoke to Route 5 into West Springfield. The Main Street corridor requires many upgrades and repairs to address public safety and economic development concerns. Obviously, there's the park at the end of this way. Why we believe impact fee money is the right thing to use. Again, now that we have 500 plus people working in the cannabis industry in downtown, and then add on to that the customers that come into the dispensaries, this is one of the main corridors that's being utilized. And so, again, as we look to make the city corridors improved, and sidebar all the work we're doing with High Street and other areas, and again, public safety, we feel that this would be a benefit, obviously to the city, but also in the bigger picture to the cannabis industry as their employees come to downtown and customers come into downtown to work. Unfortunately, as with MassTrails grants and the other grants from the state, there is a match. And so that's why we are presenting to you the idea to approve the grant to continue the study on this area. I will say that this next section of the grant will be looking at most of the main intersections. And if you notice, if you've been down there, I think there's actually a situation now with one of the intersections. I see the lights have been taken down or wrapped up, and there's some temporary stop signs there. There's some inadequate bike lanes and bike paths, definitely inadequate sidewalks, crosswalks. We've been working with Dean Tech. Obviously, we know that there's new speed humps right by Dean School. I guess it'll always be Dean Tech to those of us, Holyoke High South, Dean Campus. And so they're trying to mitigate some of the traffic concerns. We've been working with Marcotte Ford. Again, their concerns about trying to get back and forth between their two locations across the street. Obviously, we're looking at the former waterfront as the economic development. So there's a lot of benefit to addressing Main Street, this section of Main Street. And again, we believe that in line with the use of cannabis impact fee monies to have a beautification, public safety corridor work done into downtown is the right connection.
Aaron, thank you. I think we're in year 2 or maybe starting year 3 of money coming in through the cannabis impact. Can you tell us the balance and stabilization right now?
About $3.5 million.
Thank you.
And we've allocated $40,000 from my office for staff support.
Are there any questions from the committee first?
I have some.
Councilor Jordan.
So Aaron, thank you for this, and it sounds like a wonderful project. My question will be relative to the use of the impact fees.
Yep.
So as you know, there's a number of operators of cannabis facilities and such that are suing a number of communities throughout Massachusetts, saying that the fees are not being used to mitigate the quote-unquote harmful impacts of bringing cannabis to the communities. So please, one, explain to me the nexus between exactly the work that's being done and what harm of bringing cannabis here that we're mitigating by use of the impact fees. And 2, did you run that reason and rationale by the law department to make sure that they're in agreement and that they can defend that in the event of a challenge?
So a couple of things. We're lockstep with the law department on this. I hate to say it, but 10 hours a week probably talking about this issue, particularly with Attorney Bissonnette. He's been our sort of liaison. And I am in constant contact with all of the operators in the city to mitigate any concerns. So I'm doing all that we can. I think we're in a pretty good space to not be sued. But I will say to a T, every company is saying spend this money, so we want to see. So I think that we have agreement. We will have some additional proposals for you in October to utilize some of the funds. To your question, to the first part, two things, I guess I would say. One, we were just in conversations with East Hampton today about this very issue. And I guess the 2 things to say is, one, for them, they didn't understand the impacts of some of these industries, particularly INSA, on their infrastructure and on that area until like 2 or 3 years into it. Mm-hmm. And what it is, and I think we're in the same boat, is that this area was designed as a workforce area, as you know, right? Mm-hmm. And make up a number, but 80% of the people that worked in the factories lived walking distance. Mm-hmm. These areas were never meant never set up to have the traffic that's coming in, to have the deliveries that are coming in, to have the impacts on our traffic, on our roads. It's a much different impact. And so that's what we're trying to mitigate, because we believe that having the cannabis industry in the industrial zone makes a lot of sense, but that zone was not prepared. Even if we had, I think we talked about this on one of the first meetings, right? If I had 5 hotels that were looking to come into downtown Holyoke, I'd have these same issues, right? Traffic safety, public safety, roadways, crosswalks, all that stuff. So it's right in line with, we have an area that's been disinvested in, or lack of investment, both private and public, because empty buildings, right? There's no private investment. And then, I know that we're doing a great job now with the MassTrails Grant and South Holyoke and stuff like that. But, the city, we've been struggling, as you know. There's lots of repairs that have not been done in that area. And so now that we have new businesses coming in there and more people coming to work in there, this is to sort of mitigate some of those. With this, since it's really in the planning stages still, it's really about looking forward to, how do we keep these businesses in here? Well, how do we keep these businesses in here? We keep these businesses in here by having good communication between the city council and my office and these companies, which we're doing. We keep these businesses in here because we try to get those ancillary companies to come and support this business. We keep these businesses to have an entertainment district with 500 people now working here. We want them to come to their restaurants and bars, but we want to make sure that's safe. We want to make sure that the people are getting to work safely, that the intersections are safe, that we don't have constantly broken lights in intersections that don't work. So I feel that it's really about, so this one in particular, I think there'll be some other ones that will come to you that will be more immediate. But this one, since we're beholden to the process from the state for grants, this is about the planning. But again, when you think about all that traffic that's coming into this area, and there's 6 other companies along this area or towards the end of this area that may come to fruition, right? They have special permits, they're all out there getting their funding. So again, if those companies were to come online, if Victoria Frost were to come online, which is right off the 391 exit, right at the end of this corridor improvement plan, that's gonna have a big impact. So I think what we're trying to do is plan for the future.
So we're spending $50,000 exactly to do what exactly?
Yep.
With the money?
So to take this feasibility study to the next level.
So this is to pay $50,000 for a feasibility study to do something.
To get to 15% design.
To get to 15%.
And then we'll probably have to apply for another grant next year.
Okay.
Get to a 25% design, and at that point, and again, these are through MassDOT, so they're aware of this project. But at that point, if the mayor decides that this is a priority project, then they would put it on their tip. I think I'm not the expert on this, but there's different ways of getting on the tip. One of the best ways is to do a lot of the planning work ahead of time and present to them, hey, this is a priority now for the city. Look at all the work we've already done. You, MassDOT, have already put in $150,000, $200,000 to this plan. They're more apt to move it forward.
So $12,500 to pay for a quarter, if you will, of a feasibility study.
Well,
and I guess my question is, I'm okay with it, provided, and what I think I guess my overarching recommendation with all these is, yourself and your cannabis planner that I guess we're paying the full salary of now out of these funds, should come up with a form that has the law department sign off on any time this would be my recommendation if I was in your position, to protect you, by the way, and your department from these type of criticisms or scrutiny. It's really from an audit perspective, right? And defend us in a lawsuit if we get one of these lawsuits. I would develop a form that says exactly what's happening and exactly how it is mitigating the harmful effects potentially of this going here, or because, to say, well, we're going to fix some traffic lights. Well, the traffic lights don't get any younger or older because people going to buy marijuana are driving by the traffic light, okay?
Oh, absolutely.
This is why some communities are getting themselves in trouble, because they're like, well, I'm going to buy police cars with it because, we want to buy police cars, or we want to or we're going to fix a traffic circle. They're getting scrutinized for that kind of thing, and we got to be really careful. So I would develop a form that says specifically what we're doing with the money, and then the law department says, we've reviewed this, and it meets the impact because, not, a long treatise, but there should be a paragraph or two there. And then it's a one-pager that goes with all of these applications to us so that we know this has been vetted. Otherwise, this goes through and then the law department a year from now is in a situation, if somebody says what happened and where did all the money go and why, they can say, I got all the sheets right here, and it defends the whole $3 million in expenditures, and this was all legitimate stuff. That would be mine. The other thing I wanted to ask you about was, if I understand the conversation that we had the first time, and I think it was Councilor Maldonado Velez that mentioned this point, was there was an understanding there was going to be a public hearing about the use of cannabis impact funds, and before we started approving expenditures from the fund. Has that taken place?
So let me address the two things. So I'm not sure if you received the application, so I'll leave a couple copies of this for you.
I have a number of documents here, perhaps.
You do? Okay. The
Yep.
Connecticut River Pathways map, the Cannabis Impact application. Okay. I wanted to make sure everybody had a copy of that. So, having the law department vet it, that sounds great. We can work with Attorney Ball and Attorney Bissonette. To your second question, we are still forming that committee. Mayor Garcia reached out to the recommended people that came from the council. Only 2 people have replied to us. We're talking to them. One of them we have talked about reviewing this. I will be honest with you, we felt that since this was such a low dollar amount and for a planning grant, kind of uncontroversial, if you will, that we wanted to try to get this one moving because Niche Engineering is ready to do the work.
Yep.
But we've talked to the 2 people that have responded to our email, and actually Mayor Garcia sent a personal letter to them, asking them to be appointed them to the board. We've only heard back from 2. So that is still in process. That's why you don't have the other 6 applications in front of you. That's our hope for September, is that we will have applications to you in October that will have gone through a citizens review, yes. So I will be honest that this one, again, we've only talked to one of them about this project, and he's like, and again, they're very green, if you will. I guess there's a pun in there, right? But they're very green on this, so we want to sit down with them, explain it all to them.
Sure.
But we did have a conversation with one of the people that will be on that. But again, because it was a low dollar amount in the timing, I took the chance to come to you on this one.
Right. What you're trying to do is wonderful. And I'm happy to support it. The only thing I'm saying is, I just don't want, what's the old expression? The road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Cover our butts.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's just one of these things that we got to have this buttoned down, because I just don't want us to deal with this blowing back, because there's going to be so many things we can clearly spend the money on that are 100% mitigating the quote unquote harmful impacts. We don't need anybody to say, well, they did it to buy a study to put up traffic lights or something, or, we just don't need that type of scrutiny.
No, and we're internally being very mindful. We have our monthly department head meeting, the core cannabis group. I've talked, as you know, obviously with Sean and the Board of Health. If you decide to move forward on odor mitigation studies, that's totally in line with this.
Right, exactly.
Board of Health could take that.
That's an obvious one.
We've talked to the building department and the law department about other staffing. I mean, we're keeping track of our hours. We've got all that good stuff going on. So we are. But again, I think the key is keeping that communication with the businesses.
Okay. All right, Mr. Chairman. Yep, thank you.
Thank you. Quickly, the chair recognized that we have been joined by Mayor Garcia in person, as always. Mayor Garcia comes to our Finance Committee meetings and much appreciated. On Zoom, we've been joined by Councilor Israel Rivera, and Councilor Rivera has his hand up. Councilor Rivera.
Thank you. I just had 2 questions. For me, it was about the businesses that were going to be within the area, and how close of the proximity of the area that you guys are looking at or targeting. And then the other question was, have we actually done a study like us in regards to how much traffic has actually been impacted since all the cannabis industries have been open, and like what routes are being utilized the most, so that we can have a better idea of where the impact is. Like it would be cool to have a study or a map to say, since it's been open, since Holyoke Cannabis and Canna Provisions has been open, there's been improved traffic through Main Street, or if not, through Canal Street. You know what I mean? Like, it would be cool to see if we could have something like that too as well, just to like help complement the project overall, I guess.
So to the first part of the question, as I said, really the end of this area where we're doing the improvements is where most of the cannabis industries have been located, right in that Springdale Park industrial area. So right at the end of this, so it is a pathway right to those businesses if they open. There's a number of them, Solurge, Four Bros perhaps, that whole area by Sabaki. That whole area, there's 4 or 5. Many of them they seem to be close. Many of them already have their state licenses. They all have their special permits from you. So this would be directly into those businesses, 100%. And the traffic study, great idea. Obviously, we could revisit some of the traffic studies that have been submitted by some of the industry, particularly I think of Victoria Frost and others. But we would have to put together a proposal to do a traffic study. I could work with Chris, our city engineer, and that could be a really good thing to do. I also know that others have, our neighbors in East Hampton are putting together a proposal to hopefully hire a consultant to do a lot of that, to look at the traffic studies, to look at the overall impacts that the industry is having, and we thought that might be a good idea as well.
Yeah, that was pretty much where I was going with that, because it would be cool to draw from that too, you know what I mean?
Yep.
But, all right, thank
Absolutely.
you.
Thank you, Councilor Rivera. Just real quickly, I'll weigh in. Excuse me. I agree with Councilor Jordan on being extra cautious on
Absolutely.
on what's going on with impact money, because of what's happening in other communities, and not a bad idea to develop that forum with the law department. Certainly, Aaron, I understanding there's $3.5 million, and it's time we start spending some of it. And I think in the big picture, the 12,500 is a small pea on the pod for what we're trying to do. I think this is a main corridor, and with Councilor Rivera's concern, it's pretty obvious that there's been an impact on the road. All roads lead to Rome, they say, but that's not all Gary Rome, as he would like to hear it. Many of our roads lead to this exact area, and we know there's been a lot of problems even before the additional traffic coming into Holyoke on Route 5, the lower part of Route 5, leading into Main Street in Springdale. So if there's no other questions or thoughts, the chair will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I just don't know. I guess we're just saying, I guess this is related.
Well, it's 2 votes. The first vote is, Aaron is the department head for the accepting of this phase of the MassTrails Grant, which is $50,000. That's item number 1.
Okay.
Item number 2 is the proposal, it's a separate vote, to use the $12,500 from the Impact Stabilization Fund for the match of the grant itself.
Okay, well, 1 is a non-controversial vote, for sure, so I'll make a motion to approve item 1.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Motion made and second to approve item number 1 to accept the $50,000. If there's no further discussion, we'll do a roll call. Councilor Jordan?
Yes.
Councilor Tallman?
Yes.
Councilor McGivern? Yes. That's 3-0 on item number 1. Now, item number 2 is the $12,500 transfer from stabilization. For purpose of discussion, I'll make the motion to adopt.
Yep.
I'll second that.
I'll second that.
Okay. And is there further discussion?
Yeah, just briefly, I'm happy to vote for this. I would ask if before we have whatever the meeting's going to be on this, is this up for tomorrow or no?
I'm sorry. It's a good point, Councilor Jordan. Because our September schedule is messed up by the state election and by the taking off the Holyoke's Day at the Big E. We are operating through our president and thankful with Mayor Garcia through special meetings. Tomorrow night, this will be on the special meeting agenda, which was published yesterday. The Finance Committee reports, the Ordinance Committee reports, and DGR reports, with the Finance Committee reports being pending what happens this evening. So yes, it will be up for vote tomorrow evening.
Okay, thank you. So if between now and then, we'll pass it, But I would like to, if the law department could just weigh in and say they feel comfortable with this, and let the chairman know so he can report that out to us, that they feel that it is consistent with what these funds are supposed to be for, then we wouldn't have that an issue. If they say no, or we need to look into it more, I think our recommendation should be to table it. I see Mike Bissonette just
Our
popped
Assistant
on.
City Solicitor
Maybe-
is with us this evening. If he's prepared, we entertain a motion to allow him to speak.
I'll make a motion to allow Mike Bissonette to speak.
All those in favor? Any opposed? So moved.
So-
Michael, welcome.
Mike, welcome
Good
to
evening, everyone.
Yeah, let me ask you our question, Michael. We're trying to be extremely judicious to avoid any of the scrutiny and pitfalls that have happened in other communities that are being sued relative to their use of impact money, making sure that the funds are being used to quote-unquote mitigate the harmful impacts of marijuana operations coming to the community. Allegedly, the purpose that the statute envisioned as to how and why we collect these monies. So the question that's presented here in this example is $12,500 is requested to be used to pay for a portion of the match on a $50,000 grant for the MassTrails Grant to do various benevolent things along the Main Street corridor. And the question is that a close enough nexus, in your opinion, to the, that we're good of any future scrutiny of these type of funds to use these for this purpose, in your opinion?
Most of the DPW public road improvements have met with scrutiny and been approved. Right now, there are 3 cases still pending at various levels of appeal, but no retailer has been successful yet in challenging expenditures by any city in the Commonwealth. That's not to say they won't be ultimately successful if there are expenditures that are beyond the scope of what should be included. Public safety is usually pretty much acknowledged. Public works is pretty much acknowledged as being elements of mitigation that can be used by impact fees. Particularly in public works where there are entry roads into a community or accessing to the actual facility, whether it's a grow facility or a retailer. So I think in this instance, the lower road to Holyoke, as Mr. Ednacki, I think, used to say, the lower road to Holyoke would certainly qualify.
Okay.
Thank you, Attorney Bissonette. The motion on item number 2 is to adopt.
Second.
Roll call, Councilor Jordan,
Yes.
Councilor Tallman,
Yes.
Councilor McGivern, yes. That 2 passes 3-0-1. Item number 3.
Motion to take number 3 off the table?
Second.
Motion made and seconded to take item 3 off the table. Item 3 introduced under,
That looks familiar, yeah. I think
Yeah,
we
we got it, yeah.
Yeah, we do have that.
Thanks, Aaron.
Yeah, thanks, Aaron.
thank you, Aaron. Item number 3 introduced under my name as chair for the mayor, that in order, in accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 53A, the City Council accepts the Pioneer Valley Planning Authority fiscal 23 Connecticut River cleanup funding of $512,000. There is no match, that we authorize the establishment of fund or method appropriate for the accounting of receipts and expenditures of all resources associated. Off the table for discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. With us is our new city engineer, Chris Baker. We welcome you. Not your first appearance, but one of your first appearances before the Finance Committee. Chris, I just want to let you know that it's not often someone with your rookie status gets such a high agenda item going. So take good advantage of this. Be concise and walk us through this very important grant for Connecticut River cleanup, which we often know is our CSO projects.
Yep, thank you very much for getting me on as number 3. So the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission administers this fund that's through an environmental bond fund through Mass DEP. This has been going on for several years now. We're in the middle of a 4-year cycle of $10 million that they're administering to Springfield, Chicopee, and Holyoke. So the projects that are eligible for this money, as you said, must be related to CSO abatement. And so the projects that the city of Holyoke applied for during this grant round were for the design work that's being done on River Terrace, which is also known as CSO Area 21. So that'll get the design from 60% to 100% and basically get it ready to be bid. So that's a portion of this $512,000. The remainder of it will be used to finish up the Jackson Street sewer separation project. So that's really construction funding and also some engineering support services associated with that. And I think it's particularly important to use the money for that because it actually offsets the amount of state revolving fund loan money that we need to take.
Chris, if my memory serves me correct, the River Terrace, we did have a spillage a few years ago, or overflow that was quickly mitigated, but certainly was something that, well, one of the reasons why we're doing these projects, well, we're mandated to do the projects, but
Yeah.
one of the reasons is we certainly don't want our untreated sewer going into the river, which makes sense. But you remember, you weren't on board at the time, but are you familiar with that?
No, I just heard mention of it, but I don't have details about that
That's okay.
specifically.
It's-
Yeah, the concept is really that we get down to 85% of the original volume. So this is just that area in River Terrace and then the Springdale area are the two most efficient ways to reduce the overall volume that's going to the treatment plant, and that's going to cut down on the number of overflows that we have each year. So.
Thank you. Councilor Jordan.
Chris, do you think at some point we could get because this is such a complex topic,
Yep.
a summary perhaps from you? Shoot us an email when you have a moment, not pressing, but when you have a moment that kind of talks about the court decree, sort of like what are the requirements at this point? How have we mitigated so much so far? And what's out there for things that, if we had a magic wand, this is what we would do, or these are the bare bones to meet compliance that we have to do. And if there's some basic estimates or price tags around, that would be really helpful to get an update, because I was talking to a very important person in town the other day, and we were talking, and basically the conversation was post 17 years ago when we started to really constructively tackle this issue. Where are we at this point? We've obviously addressed CSO9 by building this 1 million gallon tank, and that was allegedly 60% of the problem. But then there's this everything else is 40% of the problem. So, and I know our goal was these type of grants. Bill Fuqua, other DPW people, Mike and whatnot, would come in tackling pieces of this to swallow the elephant, if you will, in parts. So an update from you or Amy or combined would be really helpful to the council to give us an update on where we're at, and
Absolutely.
begin to think about, like, over the next 5 years, 7 years, we're looking at this. We think we got a reasonable shot of getting maybe 50% of it covered by grants, and the city's going to have to put aside, another 50% or whatever. That would be really helpful to us.
Sure. Yeah, I can give you just a brief preview, which is that we have a long-term control plan that's in place. It was completed at the end of 2019. So that's the document. It's a very detailed document that essentially looks at the most cost-effective way to get to compliance with the EPA.
Okay.
So that's the document that we will follow through with.
If you could share that with us.
Yep. So that's there's actually an executive summary online.
Is there?
Yep. So I can share that link with you.
Okay, thank you.
You probably don't want to read the entire thing. So the executive
Right.
summary gives you a lot of information.
Okay.
So that's the plan moving forward, and we are in a process to finalize a consent decree with the EPA. And Mike Bissonette's involved with that. The mayor's involved. So,
Okay.
So I'd be happy to, probably would make sense for me to give you that kind of information maybe in like 3 or 4 months when we get a better sense of what the EPA is
Okay.
going to require of us.
Okay.
But I
Okay.
can provide, as best I can, some historical.
Some of this background
perspective.
information, yeah. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Counselor. Is there any other questions or discussion from the committee?
I make a motion this be approved.
Any other discussion
Second
from
that.
anyone? Motion made and second to approve, recommend to the full city council tomorrow evening. Roll call, Counselor Dardane.
Yes.
Counselor Dahlman.
Yes.
Counselor McGivern, yes. Passes 301. Chris, thank you. Moving on to item number 4.
Motion to take number 4 off the table for discussion?
Second.
Motion made and seconded to take item 4 off the table for discussion, introduced under my name. Chapter 44, Section 53A, the City Council hereby accepts the provisions of the fiscal year 19 Project Safe Neighborhoods Program, $64,850 with no match, and authorize the establishment of fund and/or other method appropriate for the accounting of the receipts and/or other expenditures of said grant. On that motion, all those in favor, any opposed, so moved.
Aye.
We have with us this evening a number of special guests, including, is it Jason?
Yes, sir. I'm attending by Zoom.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. With us
you.
on Zoom is from ShotSpotter, Jason Silva, correct? And in
Yes, sir, that is
person
correct.
from ShotSpotter is Ron Teachman, just the way it reads, right? And of course, all our members of the Holyoke Police Department that are present this evening to discuss this proposal. It's a grant, and I think most people understand, but we'd like to hear as much as possible as we can about the ShotSpotter program itself.
Okay,
Sergeant Hart.
yes, if I may, we also have Sergeant Vera Wett from Springfield Police Department.
Thank you. I was
Thank you.
waiting for an introduction, but can we have the spelling of the last name, Sergeant?
Oh, just put your microphone on. There's a button right there.
It's V as in Victor, I-R-U-E-T.
And does my good friend Dominic Sarno know you're here this evening?
The superintendent does.
That's all that counts.
All
then.
that,
Welcome, Sergeant. We appreciate your presence.
you're welcome.
Sergeant Hart?
Yes, so I just want to kind of talk about how we got here for the grant. First off, this is really a Department of Justice grant that was given to us by the U.S. Attorney's Office because we have been designated as a Project Safe Neighborhood in the state of Massachusetts. Us, along with 6 or 7 other communities in the state. So with that Project Safe Neighborhood, this is, like I said, a Department of Justice evidence-based program that they're using nationwide to help offset and curb the increase in gun violence and violent crime throughout the country. So this is the program that they decided to use for all communities. And with this program, it's really a 4-principle program. The first one is community engagement. The second portion of it is intervention and prevention. And we feel at the Holyoke Police Department that we have those 2 principles pretty well covered in a lot of the programs and services that we provide. However, the other 2 principles we lack in. And the third principle is the target enforcement strategies that they would like us to have. And those include a lot of technical, logical, and software implementation. And a part of that implementation is the gun detection system that the other communities have currently. The Holyoke Police Department does not have that technology, and this is why the U.S. Attorney's Office provided us a grant to get this technology so we can be better prepared and equipped to have this successful Project Safe Neighborhood program in the city of Holyoke. The fourth principle is the measuring of the results, and that entails a crime analyst. They do have crime analyst software available for us. However, you know, for several years we put in for a crime analyst, and we don't have a crime analyst. I know Springfield, they have maybe 30 of them. But So that would be maybe another opportunity of funding further down the road as part of a Project Safe Neighborhood community. So here we are with our first grant through the U.S. Attorney's Office and the Department of Justice for 64,000, I forget the exact number, but for ShotSpotter. So without further ado, I will pass this over for a presentation of ShotSpotter, and if you can have all your questions given to us after the presentation, myself, Ron, or Sergeant Virouet would be very glad to entertain and answer those questions.
I just had one question. Springfield has ShotSpotter?
We've had ShotSpotter since 2008.
Okay, thank you.
And Mayor Sarno loves it.
Okay, very good.
Before we start, and yes, John, thank you for setting it up, and thank you for everybody that's present this evening. We greatly appreciate it. Ryan, can I ask you one favor? If you haven't, can you turn the volume down on your laptop? Yeah, and the only reason is I think we're okay, but the mics pick it up.
It's echoing.
It might be getting it, like an echo over as we're being broadcast. But welcome. Ron, Jason, do you need to share screens? Yes. Okay. You have the ability? Okay, our wizard of the Zoom is in the Wizard of Oz closet way behind us. So if he hasn't given you the ability, he will in 1 second.
I'll fix it.
He's going to be speaking, though, in his mic, which is going to pick up if there's, delayed on his laptop. Okay. Welcome, Ron Teachman from ShotSpotter.
Do you have your microphone on the desk, the desk mic? Just
Right.
make sure that light's on.
Thank you.
Okay, very good.
I promise that technology itself works a lot better than I do. Thank you. I'm going to talk briefly tonight about ShotSpotter Respond and the companion solution that goes with it is ShotSpotter Insight, the gunshot detection. May I just introduce myself to put some context to my comments. I've been with the company just shy of 7 years, 38 years in law enforcement prior to that. Thank you. Timed out, that's the problem. "38 years before that, I was chief of police twice. I installed ShotSpotter in both cities where I served. Not far from you in New Bedford, Massachusetts, my hometown, where I was 35 years in law enforcement. In the last 3 years of my career, I was in South Bend. So I have been where you are, determining whether this service was appropriate for my city. And when I saw that it was in New Bedford and South Bend, then oversaw the procurement process, found funding, as your police chief and Sergeant Hall have done here, and then overseeing the installation. And I'll talk briefly about what that entails. Getting it adopted by the rank and file of the officers. I'm of the mindset that no technology, no strategy, no policy works unless there's adoption. Culture eats policy for breakfast. But we're confident in the leadership of Chief Pratt and his command staff that they'll use this technology effectively and constitutionally. And then also getting it socialized in the community where it's being deployed. getting the residents to understand why it's being brought into those neighborhoods. So with that, I invite anybody that's on this to interrupt me with questions. But again, thank you, Chair McGivern and Vice Chair Jordan, for the opportunity to be with you. You can hold your questions to the end if you want. ShotSpotter's been in business for over 25 years, currently held on NASDAQ as SSTI. I tell you that to say that we're not only administered by a board of directors and a CEO, but responsible to shareholders as well. So there's that level of governance. We're serving over 135 cities and 910 square miles of coverage currently. That's what we said of our last investor call. We have 40 patents that distinguish us in the public safety industry. So let's talk about why this be appropriate for Holyoke. I'll begin by telling you what it does, how it does it, but I want to take just a minute, if I may, to talk about the why. Why is this something you should consider bringing to your city? And to do that, let me tell you a story. Tonight, I don't have sound. Tonight, if there's gunshots in some neighborhood in Holyoke, what would your residents expect? They would expect the police department to respond, and rightfully so. But the problem the police department has, and I'm not singling out Holyoke, this is what we see across the country, and I'll verify this data in a moment, most gunfire goes unreported. And in my experience in law enforcement, this is the least reported significant violent crime there is. Even sexual assault and rape is reported with higher frequency than gunfire. So what the police get is just a small slice of the pie, less than 20%. Now, how do we know that? Independent academic research has verified this, but we also ask our customers, 135 of them, to give us feedback, like Springfield. How often are you getting a 911 call when gunshots occur? When we give you a ShotSpotter alert, what's the community engagement level? And as you can see here, a random sampling of our customers. Some are over 20%, but most are in the low single digits. And this is without guardrails. In other words, any call we can attribute to the gunshot alert, we match. Even if it's a mile away and 20 minutes later. Many of our customers have said, let's do a deeper analysis of what's operationally relevant. 3 minutes and 300 feet. So think of a football field and 3 minutes, because that's how fast people bleed out from gunshot wounds. And we're seeing in the low single digits across our customer base. So that, my own experience in South Bend, by the way, was getting 11% from 911. 89% of gunshots were being missed by community engagement. So this begs the question, why don't people call? And normally, if I had the opportunity, we'd have a call and response here. But I'll tell you what I hear across the country. This is not unique to Holyoke, Western Mass, or Massachusetts. Everywhere I go, people don't call because they're not sure the noise is gunfire. We try to rationalize it. It must be something else. This wouldn't be happening in my neighborhood, right? So is it fireworks? Is it backfire? Is it jackhammer? Is it when they pick up the dumpster and they drop it?
Right.
Or in the wintertime, is it the snowplow when it drops? They think someone else is calling. They're afraid if they call the police that they'll send a cruiser to their door. And what if the shooter or the shooter's gang group see that? Or they've resigned to the idea of, I guess we just have to live with that in this neighborhood. That's how it is. So that's why they don't call. So as we're looking at your police department, and as your chief, Chief Pratt, is leading, he and the police department are being evaluated internally by the officers, but more externally by your taxpayers, your residents. Are they saving lives? Are they solving crimes? Are they lowering the gun violence? Well, their chance of success is obviously going to be less than 20% if that's all they're being notified in the first place. Meanwhile, the gunshots continue. Shooters are emboldened. They don't see a police response. And this spreads fear in the community. So think, if you would please, for a moment, of your constituent, those of you that are at large, or those of you that are ward specific. Awakened by gunfire in the middle of the night, your resident gets out of bed, they go down the hall, they check on a child who's crying, they comfort the child, and at some point they go to the front window of their house. Discreetly peer through the blinds, waiting to see a response from Holyoke PD. But for all the reasons I just talked about, because no one called, there'll be no response. But your resident doesn't know that. They think the police are omniscient. They think the police are all-knowing because their frame of reference is the TV shows they watch, and what happens in every TV show. Every crime gets solved. The police know everything. They think that's how your police department is operating as well. They don't realize there's a disconnect from 911. So as they look out their window, and if you would, please respond. As they look out the window, if they think the police know but the police don't show, what might they think about their police department?
Say that again.
As your resident look out the window, if they think the police know, but the police don't show when there's gunshots, what might they think about their police department?
That they don't care. Oh, there you go. You read my mind.
And I find this to be the most problematic as a former chief
Yeah.
and a cop for 38 years. At a time we're trying to rebuild trust and engagement, we need our community. It is the best crime solver, the best crime reduction is community engagement, true community policing. But if they think fundamentally you don't care because you're not responding, and they're going to add to that, by the way, they're going to say, why don't they care about me? Why don't they care about my family? Why don't they care about people on my block? Could it be because of who we are? I'd also add to that immigration status as well. Sexual orientation, whatever protected class they live in is how they'll perceive the response they're getting from the city. So, I bet the mayor would get a response, I bet the chief would get a response, but I'm not saying response because of who I am. And as a lawyer, you know that is deliberate indifference. That's how the perception is. Now, nothing could be further from the truth about what's going on with your police department, the dedicated men and women you have, but they're handcuffed because they're only dependent on 911 or the occasional time that they witness gunfire. This creates a vicious cycle. The gun violence continues, there's a negative perception about the police department, this erodes community trust, it puts officers at risk. So let me give you a visual of what's happening in your city now without gunshot detection. That gunshot occurs, nobody knows about it. And for anybody listening or watching who may be at all skeptical about what I'm sharing for data, ask any Holyoke officer that you know, how often in your career have you been sent to an emergency room or a trauma center on a shooting victim and you had no corresponding 911 call? The first you knew about that incident was when the hospital called you. And they'll all say, yes, it happens all the time. So even in a contact, non-fatal shooting, we're not seeing 911 calls. But if someone does call, where do we send our officer? Probably to the caller's house, because they're going to say, I think I heard gunshots, that's all they can offer you. And the officer may be putting himself or herself in harm's way, driving through the danger zone. We don't know where the danger zone is with 911, we only know where the caller is. And the officer is going to talk to the caller and spend critical time trying to get a little bit more information, set up a search area around the caller's house, and what will they find? Nothing. Because according to our customers, the average caller is 780 feet away. That's about 3.5 football fields. And I know no police officer is going to set up a search area that far. Meanwhile, your victim is bleeding out. You're not getting crucial witness information, and you're not getting forensic information like spent shell casings. Furthermore, if there's a narrative in the house that the police don't care, what happens? Well, this doesn't show up in any crime stat that gives to the FBI, but I can tell you from talking to people around the country, they don't let their kids use playgrounds nearby or even leave their home after school. They keep the kids in the house. And young men, when they hear that the police don't care, that narrative in the house will drive them to self-police. This is why they join gangs or groups for their own protection or that of their family. This is the normalization of gunfire. And for the chief and the chief's command staff, if Chief Pratt's trying to allocate limited resources, he's just seeing the tip of the iceberg. It's like your doctor trying to treat you by just taking your pulse or your blood pressure. You wouldn't have that. You'd want a full lab work, you'd want CAT scans, you'd want all the data points for your doctor to properly determine what's wrong before you went through surgery or any kind of radical procedure. We're trying to cure the social disease of gun violence, and your data point is inadequate, the tip of the iceberg. You can't manage what you can't measure. A ShotSpotter asks, what if there was a way to address all these concerns? Officer safety, public perception, community trust, and violence reduction. So with ShotSpotter, you can detect the shots, the spots, and the shooter. Know where gunfire is comprehensively, the spot, notification, better than 90% guaranteed by contract, detecting the shots, and information about the shooter in real time. Is there more than one shooter? Is it a high-capacity gun? Direction of travel? And I'll talk about that in a moment if time permits. Protect your officers. Protect your plan. Give legitimacy to the deployment plan that Chief Pratt is trying to deploy based on data, and then protect the public. And I'll close quickly with connect. Connect with the crime scene, connect capabilities, connect with the community. So we tell you what happened, when it happened, and where it happened. How do we do that? We use heat maps. In your case, we've taken your data, 2 square miles, just 2 square miles across the city, which is a fraction of your geography, accounts for 80% of your shots fired. So data drives the deployment. The customer always determines what neighborhoods it goes to. In this case, it's data-driven. Heat map analysis. So once you determine, as a city, as a police department, where you want it, we're then responsible for the deployment of the technology. And I'm using the analogy of your cell phone network. Just like they put cell towers out in the fields, and more commonly putting small cells on rooftops of buildings, we co-locate on rooftops of buildings and occasionally on utility poles as needed to fill out an array. That's a term we use, is the sensor array. So putting our equipment, government buildings first, private buildings secondarily that we seek permissions, utility poles as needed. Once the sensor array is built, once the system is live, when someone fires a gun, that acoustic event radiates out and hits the sensors at measurably different times. So we detect and locate. Detection can occur up to a mile away depending on acoustic and atmospheric conditions and depending on the type of ammunition. But we put enough sensors, sometimes 20 to 25 per mile. And by the way, sensor density doesn't drive the price is fixed by square mile. So we put enough in, just like your cell phone, they put as many mini cells and small cells to give you full coverage. Your price plan is not dependent upon your cell network, right? So detection and location, that occurs almost immediately. Then the real science occurs in determining, is that noise gunfire? How do we do that? Well, we take all the data, send it to the cloud, and a machine filter eliminates most of the noises we hear. What remains, less than half, gets sent to a human for review. So no officer is dispatched unless a human has reviewed the incident. We call that an incident review center. Now imagine they listen to the audio recording, they look at the waveform configuration, they go through a series of steps. One that I think is critical to differentiate, say, fireworks, is they look at the sensor participation. We know where the sensors are located, we install them, we plot the latitude and longitude, and we put that on a map from a serial view, an overhead view, aerial view, excuse me. So when we have a gunshot or a bang or a boom, we see, do the sensors participate omnidirectionally or in a linear fashion? The former is probably not gunfire, the latter probably is. They go through a number of steps, and that takes them less than 60 seconds from trigger pull, and we're sending the police department to a precise location. So here they are working in a windowless room. I'll show you some data points. Last year we heard almost 13 million bangs, booms, and pops. Better than half were sent away by the machine classifier. The incident review looked at about 5.5 million. We only dispatched less than 300,000. That means of all the things we heard, we only dispatched on less than about 2%. So highly effective filtration. We're not sending the police department on a wild goose chase, we're sending them on legitimate firearm activity, gunfire activity. And again, that all takes less than 60 seconds. Meanwhile, we send this information out to your 911 communication center, simultaneously to desktops at headquarters, out to the patrol squad cars, whether it's laptops or tablets in their squad cars. We send it to their phones, and the sergeant can verify that they've got phones up and running in Springfield, and that's made a dramatic difference, and even to their smartwatches. And we perform on both Android and iOS platforms. So let me talk briefly about protecting your officers and better protecting your personnel, your public. So the officer would get an audible alert. I'm sorry my audio is not working on this right now on Zoom. They would get an audible alert that would cause this software to come to the front. Now normally they'd look at their computer-aided dispatch, that's the screen you just saw. Now they're going to see a shot spotter alert to the front of the screen. Let me just walk you through a couple of examples. This shows 8 rounds fired in a 25-meter radius. That's our contractual guarantee of location accuracy. Usually our accuracy is the size of this room. Then you can see, in this instance, I'll enlarge this, the shooter is moving because those 8 shots were not in one spot. They're up and down the street. We look at each individual shot. We look at the time. We can measure the time and distance, so it's a 15-mile-an-hour northwest moving shooter. That means officers can respond cop to the dot, go to the location where the shots were fired, but secondary officers can go in the direction of flight of the suspect. I think he's going to get his phone to show you. So now, a second example, 16 rounds fired. You see multiple shooter, high capacity. The officer, 16 rounds, the nearest street address. We have a timestamp, multiple shooter, high capacity, and an incident review center, investigative lead summary with a timestamp of every shot fired and the sequence of shots. Why is sequence important? Sequence is critical to determine who the primary aggressor is when you have two people shooting at each other, like if Ricky and Ron are shooting at each other as adversaries, no third-party witness. This way the officers can tell who shot first. It also is very important for Chief Pratt to determine if an officer-involved shooting is justified based on the sequence of shots and the location. By the way, we follow up with a detailed forensic report as well in an officer-involved shooting or a homicide. Another example, they can hear the audio by clicking on this, and I'm sorry my audio is not working on Zoom. I should have unchecked that box. And we give you a Street View interlink. So in other words, let's say that this is Sergeant Hall. Let's say he's back in the day. It's Officer Hall. This is his beat, right, where this incident occurs. He's tied up on an accident. He's tied up on a domestic. I'm a secondary officer now being assigned to go to his beat. I don't know the streets. I'm in the blind. We have an active shooter. I don't know the streets that well. I'm looking for a street address. I might roll right into the active shooter. But what we do for officer safety is we interface with Google Maps. So now the officer simply clicks on an icon, this Street View icon. Doesn't have to type anything in. Click on an icon. We take the officer to Street View. Now the officer can see exactly where they're going, pick a landmark building like the one on the far right, and make a tactical approach. And if they don't know how to get there, we preload their location and their dispatch address and navigate for them on whatever they have on their phone. No need to type anything in, it's automatic. Last example, this is a real case out of Chicago. Imagine someone calling about what they thought were fireworks given the number of rounds fired, 18. Now you can see 18 rounds, high capacity multiple shooter, what looks like a T intersection, what looks like railroad tracks. But again, Street View interface, now you see it's a bridge. Now we know to send enough officers to cover each end of the bridge and a couple at street level, given the level of threat, but you wouldn't know any of this if you got a phone call from 911 780 feet away. This is the kind of tactical intelligence that helps the police to save lives and protect the community. We also give them situational awareness. Now, let's say, for example, I'm working in patrol and I'm coming to work later tonight on the night shift, or I'm working overtime, or I have a special duty, a side job, or a detail. I think you might call them details here, right? Okay. So I'm going straight to my detail. Let's say my detail is at Ogden Park, or I'm working the midnight shift. On my device, before I even come to the station, while I'm showering and shaving and everything else, I can see what has transpired since my last shift 24 hours ago. Click on any one of these yellow teardrops and bring up the police report to totally familiarize myself with what's going on, to better serve and protect my community. If I've been off for a couple of days, click where it says 24, goes to 3, screen populates. Been off for a week's vacation, click again, goes to 7, screen populates. Let me give another example for the chief and the command staff on deploying resources. 24 hours, 3 days, 7 days, and you can see these clusters, any kind of discretionary resource, street crimes unit, tactical force, overtime patrols, put the cops where they're needed based on data, and you see these clusters. Now, we don't just give you alerts. We have a team of customer success people that will be assigned to the account, all former law enforcement, both federal and local. They will help an onboarding program which includes training, best practices that we learned from around the country. You define success. We'll build the key performance indicators, and we give support as we're going live. And we have ongoing consultative services. We also give litigation support. So we'd work with your prosecuting attorney, both county prosecutor and U.S. attorney. So we will train your staff of your county attorney, district attorney, and the U.S. attorney's office. She's already been trained because we have 11 customers already in Massachusetts. But if she has any assistant U.S. attorney dedicated here to the west side of the state, we'd make sure that they were fully acquainted with ShotSpotter. Again, detailed forensic report, and we testify behind it. We've been accepted in every state where we've been deployed. Let me skip through this. So lastly, connect. Connect to the crime scene. You can't solve the case and you can't save a life if you don't know where you're going. And again, 80% of the time you never get a call, 20% of the time you're too far away and the call is delayed because there's contemplation. I want to breeze through this quickly. There's something called NIBIN. You may have heard this. It's a National Integrated Ballistics Information Network. It's essential to get these shell casings into this repository to match. Just like we have fingerprints in a national database, we put our evidence, our forensic evidence, into a national database. Why is this so important? Because the ATF is precluded from having a digital collection of guns. Congress precludes that. I'm not being political. All their all their records are in paper files. And the last I just saw a story, it's about at least 2 weeks, maybe a month, to get these reports back. So even if you find a crime gun, it's hard to trace. And it only comes back to the first retail purchaser anyway. So after spending all this time, you find the first retail purchaser who says, I lost it, it was stolen, or I sold it. Plus, we have a phenomenon right now of homemade guns called ghost guns, and they're untraceable. So you have to link these guns together. How does ShotSpotter help? Well, we get you to the scene and give you a chance to find the forensics. Then if you do have a homicide or a non-fatal shooting, we can link those events together, and where that first scene may have had no property damage, nobody hurt, now we know to go back. It may have been celebratory gunfire, it may have been a bad drug deal, but now we know that that house where the gunshot occurs, we canvass the neighborhood, and we can identify the perpetrator from that shots fired call that may be involved in the homicide or in the non-fatal. Search warrant execution, get the gun. The ATF has a workflow, and I'm sorry I can't skip through this because I can't advance my slides with this projector. Evidence collection is enhanced with ShotSpotter. You can see from this Urban Institute study a couple of years ago, 50 to 89% in homicide cases, 12 to 41% in robbery cases. We can integrate with other technologies like computer-aided dispatch, record management systems, license plate readers, even UAVs and drones. Community engagement directors, Dr. Gerard Tate and Paul John, are part of our staff. They would work with your city as well. Sharing data, we teach data for good. Use ShotSpotter data. Use the gunshot data to better deploy your nonprofit resources and your governmental resources where they're most needed. I'll talk in a moment about trauma response. They help by engaging your community with any community meetings you want to have beyond my appearance here tonight, even university partnerships if you want. They're expert at it. We can inform street outreach programs, violence interrupters, use the data. Focus deterrence, which gangs or groups are the most violent. Limiting your resources to those that are most offending your population. And just allow me for 30 seconds to talk about something that's close to my heart. Recognizing that gun violence is not just about those when bullets penetrate flesh. When you have persistent gunfire in neighborhoods, we're all affected and harmed psychologically, that fear. But particularly our youth, where their brains are still in development. Our brains are in development to our early 20s. So imagine your young people here in Holyoke, living in a neighborhood that has persistent gunfire. They're suffering not just psychologically, they're suffering physiologically. It's called average childhood experiences. That leads to disrupted neurodevelopment. The brain development is delayed and harmed by trauma, which leads to a host of things you can see here on the diagram. So what's the remedy? You take the clusters of gunfire particularly, whether it's a chief meeting with a school superintendent or an SRO at the local school level, but you share the data with your school officials and you can monitor the kids who are living in the neighborhoods that have persistent gunfire and just see if there's a depreciation in their attendance, in their performance, or their behavior. Maybe they're not coming to school because they're afraid of the commute. Maybe they can't pay attention in class because they're up all night with fear of gunfire. Or maybe they're in fear while they're sitting in class, what might happen to them when they go home. And it's affecting their ability to study, the disrupted neurodevelopment. Or hurt people. Maybe they're acting out because of what's done to them. So, recognizing them as victims, giving them wraparound services to save their school career instead of expelling and disciplining and all things we've done historically. In closing, you bring ShotSpotter to Holyoke. When your resident looks out the window, they'll see a response from your police department. They'll see them effectively getting to victims and transporting those victims because time is tissue. They'll see them set up a search area, talk to witnesses, gather forensic evidence, and bring those perpetrators to justice. And I'm not advocating mass incarceration. I'm talking about precision policing. Only those very few, and we know statistically across the country, it's a very small percentage of the population that drive most of the violence. Quarantining them, removing them before they cause further social harm. And before they take down the yellow tape, we're going to ask your officers, and I know they'll do this, knock on doors or ring doorbells, canvass the neighborhood, talk to residents, and say, we're here because we care about you. And if they don't answer the door, you leave door hangers, such as we provide. We have door hangers that we leave. But if they answer the door, are you okay? Are your kids okay? We're here because we care about you. Here's my business card. If you'd like to give me a call and tell me what's happening with that house next door, I'd love to hear it. Whatever you tell me can be kept confidential. But the better informed I am, the better guardian I can be as your officer. This is how we change the narrative from the police don't care to the police are there. We see an improvement in our police-community relationships in every city that we've been in. We bring ShotSpotter to Holyoke. You can detect, protect, connect. and make your community safer. And I thank you very much for listening to me.
Chief,
Ask if you have any
we
questions, what do you think?
appreciate it very much. There are going to be a number of questions. We ready for questions and answers, Sergeant Hart, do you think?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and I think, and we know some of the, this is our second meeting, we know some of the dollar details, but we do want to get into that a little bit too. Chief, I just want to ask a quick little question. You said New Bedford, right?
New Bedford.
New Bedford was your big career. In South Bend,
Indiana.
okay, so are you familiar with the university that's in South Bend, Indiana? And the big game Saturday night?
On a sunny day, there was this reflection on a gold dome, and nobody really told me what that was about.
I want to point to a picture on the wall up there. That's Jim Shea. He was our city clerk for close to 40 years, I think over 40 years, an incredible man. Jim Shea had two brothers, all three from Holyoke. Both of them are graduates of the University of Notre Dame. His two brothers wrote the lyrics and the music for the fight song. It was first sung here in Holyoke, 2 blocks from this very spot. And he brought it back to the student body who loved the song, and we know the rest of history. So cheer, cheer for old Notre Dame.
Thank you, thank you. I was
But
privileged to,
it's a story we love to tell.
thank you, thank you.
Questions? Councilor Jordan.
Yes, well, gee, welcome. First thing I was going to ask is, could we get a copy of your presentation? Is that something you can email to us? Yeah, thank you. So, where to begin? How about the technology? To me, seems readily obvious that it's an improvement over the human ear, right? I mean, and people calling, and you don't need to convince me on that piece of it for sure. I think the first question I have was, one, I wanted this to be a presentation tonight because I think it's important that people are educated on the benefits of why the city of Holyoke might do something like this and have this and why. And two is also to bring light to what are some of the statistics that shootings are a serious problem in the city of Holyoke. You know, we hear about Joe Schmo got gunned down and, you know, we had X number of murders in town. But and that's an obvious, sadly, you know, a tragedy of how many, and we count sort of like, okay, this year there was 6 and next year's 10 and this year's worse than last year, or this year only had 3 murders, so I guess we're doing better. I think it's all bad if you have anything over 0 myself, but especially like Holyoke, but there will always be these type of tragedies of people shooting other people for Lord knows what reason. But what I wanted to point out was there is all these shootings, I was just alarmed by the number of actual people shooting off guns in town.
Yes.
And I was wondering if I think briefly you threw it up on one of the slides, you had some statistics there. How many shootings are being reported of shots fired, just hearing shots fired? How many did we have per year in Holyoke?
Okay,
Yeah.
I have it.
Well, I can just touch base. One of the main reasons why we became a Project Safe Neighborhood community was because the U.S. Attorney's Office collected NIBR's statistics and found that Holyoke was #1 in a lot of the gun call incidents as well as violent crime incidents. So
Is that something, John, you could send to the city councilors?
I could get
Some of those
I'll ask the
statistics?
U.S. Attorney's Office for that
Yeah.
information.
So NIBORs, tell us a little bit about that. Is that like the FBI statistical?
That is the FBI.
That is the FBI statistical data. Okay. You know, I think could you send that to us for a couple years worth and maybe what their findings were to compare? Because what I think we need to emphasize is it's a real problem. You know, I don't think we talk about it enough that there are all of these shots fired incidents. And so, I don't know, Ron, if you got to that slide
Yeah.
yet, how many per year was it?
So we looked at January 1st, 2019 through August 8th, 2021.
So let me see, this is January 19 through August of
2021.
Okay.
And the 2 square miles that we were proposing for coverage had 379 shots fired. That's 80% of the 379 in a 2 square mile area. So it's heavily concentrated. It's not
Okay.
spread out evenly across the city.
So that's a
Right.
2.5-year period, right?
Correct.
So,
But again, that's probably less than 20% of what's really going on, because all
well,
we have is a,
that's right. That's kind of the other
iceberg.
piece of this. So,
Right.
if we, I don't know, we'd have to get the calculator out, but
And keep in mind, I think those numbers that we provided them, ShotSpotter, were from our internal IMC system. So, so we would look up, and our system, our software is antiquated, so we would look up shots fired calls for service, and those are probably those numbers. However, you could have a disturbance call that was really a shots fired call, or any other number of calls that were actually initiated through shots.
right. So let's just stipulate to the fact that we have a serious amount of these calls over, let's see, just back of the envelope here. You know, let's just say it's over this time period would be something like around 4,000, right? Over a 2.5-year period. Because if you had 400 and that's only 80%, if we added another 100 of that would be 500. 500 times, and that's only 20%, then you would be, let's see, 500, and you said it is 80% go unreported, so that would be 5 times that amount, would be 2,500 over 2.5 years. So that would be 24, 30. It's just under 100 a month. So let's just ballpark it at 80 a month. So that's 80 or 90 a month. That's what, 3 a day? 3 a day, that's a lot.
if you live in that neighborhood, it is.
Yeah, and or even if you didn't live in the neighborhood, I mean, you're driving through. I mean, we're all residents of the same community, and to even have 3 of these incidents per day, and again, this is all back of the envelope. I have to check my own math here, but that's a substantial problem. And so, where I want to go with some of my questions are: you guys have been doing this for a substantial period of time. Questions are you seeing things like crime rates going down, shootings going down, conviction rates going up, lives being saved going up? Like those type of meat and potato statistics, I didn't see those addressed in your presentation, but is it solving the problem? Okay, is it like, are we getting safer because we're using ShotSpotter?
Right. So allow me, since you asked for some data points, damn. Let me just read it off. So why it's
Maybe Sergeant Veerwet can give some input on Springfield's side.
Yeah.
We saw in Greenville, North Carolina, a 33% reduction in gun violence injuries in the first year they deployed. In the Englewood neighborhood of Chicago, which has historically been the most violent, a 40% reduction. Cincinnati had a 48% reduction. And I can send you these statistics. They're on our website, by the way, under our results page.
Oh, okay.
Oakland, California had a 66% reduction in shootings per square mile. Fort Myers had a 25% reduction in homicides over their prior year. West Palm Beach, 29% reduction. San Diego, 32% reduction in homicides from a prior year. Miami, 35% reduction. Pittsburgh, 36% reduction. Camden County, 46% reduction, and so forth and so on. About lives saved, just give you one data point among many. 2021, Oakland, California had over 100 victims of gunfire that they were dispatched to by ShotSpotter that had no corresponding 911 call. None. We also are very familiar with a former Oakland captain, retired, named Ursi Joyner, and we can send you this if you want to Google Ursi Joyner, Joyner. He was gassing up his car at a gas station in Oakland. He was assaulted by 4 males trying to rob him. They shot 22 times. People came rushing to him and stood over him with their cell phones, taking video of him bleeding to death, and nobody called 911. ShotSpotter sent the Oakland police. They, the ambulance people, and the surgeon saved his life. He credits God, ShotSpotter, Oakland police, the surgeons, and his family and friends for their support, or he wouldn't be here today. That's just one anecdote among many. You see us on Twitter and LinkedIn every day putting out stories of people whose lives were saved, arrests that were made, and so forth. But I think, and I'll stop at this, as I told you, I was a cop 38 years, a chief for 8 years. I don't think there's a more challenging customer base to satisfy than police. And I mean that affectionately. If it didn't work, they wouldn't buy in. We wouldn't have deployed in Springfield in 2008 and had them expand 4 different times on their 5th phase. They wouldn't be a customer, a loyal customer all these years, and have a sergeant who volunteered to come here tonight on his own time to answer your questions about how it works next door in Springfield. I can give you anecdotes across the city, but this is not Springfield, Illinois, or Springfield, Missouri. This is Springfield, Massachusetts next door. It works here as well. We have 135 customers, all but one renewed last year, and the only one that didn't is going through a city ordinance, a privacy ordinance, and they've asked all their vendors to step back and reapply. We're actively engaged with them now. In fact, I've got a Zoom call with them at 9 o'clock tonight to talk to their community meeting about coming back into that city as well. We wouldn't have that level of engagement. And last year, not only did everybody else renew, a third of our customers went to a multi-year agreement, and a third of our customers expanded the footprint, like Springfield has done 4 times. We wouldn't see that loyalty, we wouldn't see that customer satisfaction if this didn't work. So it's not just measured in arrests and outputs, it's measured in outcomes, community engagement, officer morale, officer safety. Those are the other metrics that we look at as well.
How about the point about catching the bad guys? Because, I mean, that's the people we want off the streets, right?
Sure.
Shooters, because I just got to assume these aren't shots typically from people, self-defense
Right.
with law-abiding people with licensed firearms, typically. At least that's my understanding. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
Sure. ShotSpotter tells you what happened, where it happened, and when it happened. We don't tell you who,
Right,
and we don't tell why. We leave that to the police.
right.
So those kind of outcomes are dependent upon the police department.
But is it
We
increasing catching the bad people?
Well, first of all, you got to get to the scene, and you got to get there promptly.
Right,
So we get you there within 60 seconds notification of trigger pull to a precise location.
Right.
That's the biggest advantage we can give the police to respond immediately, first to save a life, and then secondarily to investigate the case, maybe have a shooter on the scene, still there, get the physical evidence, get the witnesses, and identify your perpetrator.
On the Springfield side, I would say that the biggest point for us was finding out actually how many shootings were actually occurring in the city on a regular basis. So first stage of I got involved in 2010. The system had been on for 2 years, and at the beginning of the presentation, the chief explained that the biggest thing is the buy-in. If your patrol guys, your supervisors that are on the street, the first line guys aren't buying into it, it's going to be a tough sell. And obviously with anything new back in 2008, I believe ShotSpotter was in its inception, maybe a couple years into it. We had to figure out what was the best way to deploy. So once we figured that out, the second thing we discovered with having all these shootings was how do we start to analyze them to figure out the best way to attack some of these areas. Because once you discover that you have that many shootings on a regular basis, which I get the emails and I get the notifications on my phone and I manage sending them out. We just had a victim shot on August 9th that we found, no one called about. I guess that would be one of the biggest things, is the officers being trained to get there. So we wrote a real extensive policy that we share all over the country, we use with ShotSpotter, that specifically entails our guys to go specifically to this cause, and they self-deploy. In most instances, the officers are going to these locations before dispatch even gives it out. They actually sometimes remind dispatch, hey, we're going to this ShotSpotter, did you get it? Because they have their computers and they can log off and other things can occur. So the officers are responding within a certain timeline, of getting the notification, and once they're properly trained, our guys have gotten pretty good with it. They know when they're hearing it, they know it's a good shooting. There's no guarantee that we're always gonna find evidence, but in a lot of instances, we're almost always finding some sort of evidence, whether shell casings, damages to home, damages to cars. On some occasions, we're finding victims, and we've been catching people leaving the scenes.
Good.
Driving away with guns.
Good.
It was a hard sell at the beginning. If you were to tell me 26 years ago that I was going to be taking my personal cell phone and putting a software that was a police-related tool and walking around with it, I'd tell you absolutely not. But after the first couple years of me training and in-service training and telling guys, hey, we have this new software that's going to be able to help you when you're on your scene to get you precisely where you need to be. And then when you're not in your cruiser, if a shooting happens to occur 2 houses down, you'll still get it on your watch and your phone, so you know that there's a shooting outside while you're inside of a home. Guys, I wouldn't tell you that they would do it. And now, when we first deployed the response side of it for the cell phones, I mean, I have state police officers that work in our city. I have task force members, FBI members. All the colleges in the area are on our account. So we have 4 or 5 different universities in the city of Springfield. I have all their departments involved so that if a shooting occurs, they know that it's occurring and they can perform their lockdowns. Our student resource officers in the schools have them, so they properly respond, and the staff members that have worked security in the schools have it on their phones. It's been massive. If I were to, and again, I didn't print this stuff out, but we have an enormous amount of users that beg us to give them the ability to have this device on their phone, because while they're working or even off duty, they can stay on top of it. It's gotten to the point whereas you would think that people would call, but they don't, and you're expecting dispatch to send you to a call. Officers now question the dispatcher when they do get a gun call, if it's real or not, because if ShotSpotter didn't go off, they're so used to getting that information from ShotSpotter first that they're almost in disbelief that someone actually called. That's how it's gotten to our point.
Interesting.
So, and I've had to train my guys and say, hey, we started with 3 square miles. We're about to deploy our 9th square mile. We just finished deploying an additional square mile on a separate part of the city, which is something new that ShotSpotter just started doing, because we're a tough cookie and a tough customer, and I'm sure that he's been there 7 years, and I'm sure he's heard the stories. We do our own testing. We do a lot of stuff that we do with ShotSpotter, and we ended up finding certain areas that we were having problems in our city, that we actually singularly deployed a system, a 1-mile standalone system that wasn't possible before. So we just deployed a one-mile system that's going online next week, and then we just got approval to do the Indian Orchard of the city, which is completely the northeast side of the city. It's on an island on its own. We're going to be deploying an additional square mile in that area. We sign contracts on a 3-year basis. We do 3-year contracts for our service agreement. We're about to renew our contract next July, but we do it every 3 years. We go for 3 years at a time.
Sergeant, were you surprised once you had this technology, how many more shots were actually occurring in Springfield than you guys probably ever figured?
I'm still surprised till this day. I'm at home and it goes off. It went off last night. I listened to it. I can pretty much tell. You know, I've listened to it for so much that when we used to have certain information, what he said, we could see the sensors and see the array. Yep, that's a shooting, that's not. And the other part of the surprise was the fact that we're responding to these locations, and once you train your guys and they go through it, the accuracy of being able to pinpoint within that, 23 square meter location, and I teach the guys how to locate, getting to it, because we go to the dots, not the address, how we're able to find the shell casings, how we're able to find the victims sometimes behind a house, because they got shot in front of the house and they ran behind the house. Stuff like that's happened. But we just had a shooting on the 9th, and we found the guy, and he was shot, and he never called. No one called. We drive around the city early on. Let's say within the last 10 years, ShotSpotter used to do live testing. They no longer do that. But back then we did. And we would literally drive around with with DPW trucks filled with sand and safety zones and safety officers. And we would do live shootings in the city, throughout the city, in locations where we had shot spotter sensors and locations that we didn't. And I would say that I was part of every test. I had the former commissioner from Boston come out, Commissioner Gross, because they were expanding their system, and they were actually making a unit dedicated for ShotSpotter because their system got so big. And they were about to do a training in Boston that we were going to be part of. They came out with their whole staff, and we drove around, and we literally shot. And on that one particular incident, we do about maybe 18 shot, incidents per. Not a single call on any of them. Not a single call.
Wow.
Downtown, North End, South End, where we work, that's been the biggest awakening for us. So it's something that we're at this point dependent on, and I don't see any.
For Springfield, do you think it was the 20% to 80% no-call ratio, or do you think when you guys started, it actually was even more than that?
I think it was more than that, and I think that we saw it work when it needed to work. And then there's another aspect of this that I was talking to the mayor and everyone else before. It's that psychological impression that it begins to give to those guys that do want to commit those shootings.
They think
They're
twice.
second guessing when they're shooting. Are they going to catch me? I think I've seen that difference. So I would say there's been a curbing in the gun violence as much as there could have been before, because psychologically they don't know how quick we're going to get there. They just don't, and I think it's helped in that aspect.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Sergeant. Counselor, if you're good for the second, we do have Counselor Rivera online with his hand up. Counselor Rivera?
Thank you, Councilor McGivern. I got a couple of questions. I wasn't at the last meeting, so for me, some of them might be around how much it's gonna cost, right? How much would it cost us later on in the future? Because it sounds like the grant is probably a one-time grant. And then I also have questions around like the systems that we've used in the past, like the camera systems that we have all over the city, how effective they've been over the years. And I'm surprised to learn that they never had ShotSpotter, because I thought that they had something similar to that back in the days. Whenever like a shot or a sound would go off, the camera would move in that direction, supposedly. At least that was what Chief Scott had said back then, right? But ultimately, I had questions around what happened to that program, and in general, and if something like that would possibly happen with this program later on in the future. So like making sure that things like that don't happen again, where we spend or invest a certain amount of money and later on down the road, we technically don't keep up with it. So we have literally wasted a massive amount of money on technology in the past that has not possibly provided the outcomes that we were looking for. And I'm hoping that we would try to prevent the same with this situation here. For me, I think one of the questions I would probably ask is how much does it cost for a response to ShotSpotter every time all the police officers have to respond to a ShotSpotter call? What is the cost of that?
Okay, Councilor Rivera, thank you for your questions. Thank you for reminding us too of the camera program we used to have maybe back in 15 years ago. Those same cameras are still up, and for the past 10 years we've been asking for cameras, not only through our capital budget, but just recently through ARPA. That was one of our requests to kind of upgrade our camera system. But as far as cost goes, to actually break down the actual cost for an officer to respond to one of these shots called, I would say, what is the cost of a life? And I don't think you can put any type of value on that. So really
I can say the same thing for a teacher in education too. or a doctor at the hospital, or a nurse, or there's a variety of people that I would say the same thing for too. And no disrespect to anybody that works in the field, but like in reality, like how much would it cost? And not even just that, it's just if we have a shooting that could be a false alarm. The other question I would have is how many false alarms do you average, right? Because if it's a false alarm and then you have all the cars responding to this one call and it's a false alarm, what is the cost to that? What is the impact of the community, and what is the safety if all the cars are responding to one community and it's a false alarm? So like there's a variety of different, because in the presentation there was nothing about false alarms. There was about a team of people that review the calls, or review the sounds. They go over the sounds and they go through a process that analyzes the sounds and somehow defines what is a shot versus a firecracker, or a loud muffler, or a loud, super loud music like we have in Holyoke all the time. There's a variety of different things. So to me, it's like, how effective would it be if we're having a whole bunch of people going into the same areas all the time? On like how many false alarms a day do you guys average?
Thank you.
So thank you for the question. Our customers responded back to us in a survey of 2020. In 2021, we actually engaged an outside firm called Edgeworth Analytics. Their report is available on our website. Our false positive rate, according to their study, again, an independent audit, was 0.5%, 0.3 in 2020. So less than half of 1% is it. We thought it was gunfire, and it was shown not to be. There was ground truth disproving the alert. We're not wasting personnel on false alarms. There are measures that police take about false burglar alarms. There are measures they take about people making crank calls to 911. Again, we wouldn't have 135, close to 140 customers. We wouldn't have the kind of loyalty that we have from agencies like Springfield if we were dispatching officers on false alarms. The science works, it identifies gunfire accurately, and the officers responding know that. That's why we have the loyal customer base that we have.
If I could help the counselor.
Sergeant? Yep.
Sergeant Virouette, counselor. I think one of the biggest things that helps with your question to mitigate the fact that there's a fee involved with the service and then the additional manpower and money that goes into every second that they're responding to one call or another is the policy. One of the biggest things that helped us at the Springfield Police Department to dictate who responded, how many officers responded, and what type of response was necessary after we learned of, there had to be a learning curve, because our department was one of the first handful of departments in the country to use this, was that we had a very detailed policy that will dictate when it's a two-man vehicle, when it requires a supervisor or requires a detective. And it was all stipulated to how the shot spotter call came out. ShotSpotter provides you with a detailed call when they give it to you, and it tells you if it's a multiple shooting, a single shooting, and what they call an actual shooting. And they also give you information when they think that it could possibly be a shooting. And those are very, very specific, defined, filtered type calls that they provide us. So what we did at the Springfield Police Department was we figured out that we didn't want 10 cruisers going to every shooting, because there's that many shootings at a given period within a week. What the important part of the response is that we're starting to find evidence. And on some occasions we were finding victims, and on other occasions we were finding damage and other issues that were occurring that I think would be important for data entry, because the second part of my response to your question is that you're gonna need a dedicated individual or analyst to monitor and collect this information and put it together so that your department can use it for proper future deployment. So so that what you said at the beginning was, if we invest this money and we're 10 years down the line, why didn't we follow up on this technology? And the reason you're not going to be able to follow up is two major reasons. If you don't have the proper policy in place that dictates how you're going to use this software, who's going to respond, and what the response will be, including the follow-up. And the second part is, if you don't have a dedicated personnel, like an analyst, that can babysit the system the way that I do, then yes, there's a possibility that, and we have analysts, I'm not the analyst, so I take that back, but I oversee the system, and I follow through with the analysts to make sure that we're getting all the right information. I think that's how this type of software would successfully give Holyoke an upper hand in the future, and being able to decide what parts of, specifically this area of the city that you guys are looking at, how to attack that situation. If there are this many shootings, there is a pattern there that you guys want to attack going forward.
And then I guess the question is for Sergeant Hart, are we prepared for that? What the Sergeant Verret just mentioned, because that's something that's no quick put together. That is really getting all your I's dotted and your T's crossed, and making sure that we have somebody identified that would be pretty much babying the program and watching over the program, and making sure that we are literally using it to the most effectiveness of the possibilities if we can. I mean, ultimately for me, I don't know how I feel about it being put in certain communities overall. That's just my personal opinion when it comes to that. And just statistically, it's gonna always look like it's put in black and brown communities. Not trying to bring that piece up, but at the end of the day, you cannot also ignore it and not acknowledge the piece that the people that we're gonna be policing the most are gonna be the people that are low income and black and brown communities, if we're going by the data that I believe was set forth. So I just want people to know that and understand that before we go ahead and take a vote on it with sincerity and just belief and understanding that this is not going to cover the whole city of Holyoke. This will cover a section of Holyoke, and just a particular section of Holyoke. But I'm welcome to listening to what other people have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Rivera.
Okay, thank you.
We have a number of people that are about to ask questions, but
Yeah.
go ahead, Sergeant.
Yeah, he asked me if we're prepared for that. So the answer would be yes. A portion of the grant that we're getting is designated to train two of our staff that are going to be overseeing the whole training portion for our officers, and for analyzing it and storing data in our computer center in the station. So that portion is going to be covered. And I think that the chief just wanted to address some of the demographic issues.
Just quickly repeat what I said earlier. The deployment is driven by the customer, and it will be data-driven. Now, we have preliminarily looked at the gun violence data here in Holyoke. This is the proposal that we've given. It is subject to the chief and the mayor as to exactly where they want the outline to be. This is 2 square miles. And as I said, these
The red line is the 2 square miles,
right.
correct?
And this represents 80% of the gunfire over that period that I outlined earlier.
Still
Now,
a large concentration of where black and brown people are living in here, just saying.
And the point is, without ShotSpotter, the people who live in this coverage area have not been served and protected adequately, which is exactly what the Holyoke Police is trying to address. If you look at the demographics of your victims of gun violence, victims who were shot and murdered, victims who were shot and survived but with lifelong complications, people who are plagued by the nuisance of gunfire activity, who are in fear. This is about addressing those people in these neighborhoods that need this protection. This is about better serving and protecting the residents of Holyoke. We'd love to cover the whole city. We understand that's cost prohibitive. So the idea is to deploy this where the gun violence has been historically, because the police have not been able to properly serve and protect. This is a tool to better serve and protect the community. That's what drives the deployment. Look at the demographics of who's being victimized now, and I think you're probably going to find it's disproportionate. It is in every city. Poor people of color overrepresented among victims of gun violence, direct victims and vicarious victims.
Thank you. Councilor Rivera, you all set for now?
Yeah, I'm all set.
Thank you. Councilor Tallman.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a brief question. You showed the 2 square miles. Was it supposed to originally be 1 square mile?
Just so we're clear on the numbers, the grant in and of itself is for 1 square mile. 1 square mile. However, the proposal, I know this is for finance and this is just for the for grant purposes, but I believe it's the mayor's intention to extend that radius to 2 square miles. So that's why we're giving you the figures for the 2 square miles.
So 50/50.
Okay, so the price would be different than if it was a 2 square mile.
Well, basically what it comes down to, I believe for 2 square miles, it's for 1 year is $99,000. So with the grant, either the mayor and the city pays the $99,000, or they can use the grant money to offset the city's cost, and the mayor can use those funds for other areas in the city.
Joe, could I?
Right, and my concern also is if this is something that, and I know it's needed, I know the presentation was well done, but if this is something that the city can get each year, I know the Department of Justice grant showed that we are in need of this, but is this something that we'll almost be able to get every year, or is it something that the city's gonna have to pay out of their own budget?
I'm not sure of future funding from the U.S. Attorney's Office.
Okay, because that's a concern too, the cost.
Right.
And, you know, I know this is something that Springfield, it seems to work well, and I thank the sergeant from Springfield for coming down, but it comes to a budgetary issue, I think, for each community, is it something that we can afford and can it be effective, as some of my colleagues stated earlier. You'd like to see the numbers, you know, be effective and the numbers of crime incidents come down, and for the safety of our citizens. So
Right.
that's one of my major concerns.
Right. I know Mr. Vega spoke earlier, and Assistant Attorney Bissonette spoke and alluded to the fact of some of those funds for the marijuana fees can be used for public safety purposes as well. So there's $3.5 million that you can maybe use towards that. There's another source.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Bacon.
You're still on mute, Linda. Maybe we come back to her.
Councilor Bacon, you're muted.
Okay, I
There
finally
you are.
got it off, thank you.
We got you.
Okay. Thank you. Took me a bit somehow to get unmuted. So it seems to me, based on the studies that have been presented tonight, that with the shot spotter, and assuming we set up the good policies on response, that we would be making perhaps a more effective use of our limited police staff, because we know that we're always in a situation trying to recruit. And it seems like if we give our officers more tools to be able to do a better and safer job, it's going to help the more dangerous areas of our community be safer, as well as our officers who are responding. So to me, I see this as another tool in the toolbox, and I think it's pretty compelling when an officer from our neighboring community comes in on his own time to talk about his personal experience in first questioning how it would be and then giving firsthand information to us about how it has really worked well for the officers. And it's interesting to me to hear some people being concerned about the cost of it, and certainly we have to be wise with, taxpayers' money. But I think one of the primary duties and function of government is the safety of our citizens. And I think those in the community that are listening to all this gunfire, from what I've been seeing on the news nationwide, the folks in these neighborhoods want more safety. They want more police response. And I think that overall, this is a really good step for us as a community to take, especially upon a recommendation from our lead law enforcement agencies, right? So those are my takes on what I've heard tonight and at the other meeting. And I definitely think we should move forward with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Bacon. Councilor Tessa Murphy-Ramboletti.
Thank you, Councilor McGivern, and thank you everyone for your presentation tonight. This is something that I've been trying to do a lot of research into, and I have previously reached out to Chief Pratt with some of my questions, which he has been helpful to answer. That being said, I do agree that deploying this in some neighborhoods and not others in Holyoke is problematic. We recently had several days of reported gunshots up on Homestead Avenue, and just judging by that map, I don't really see a lot of the other areas being covered, and so I just wanted to see if you guys had an estimate on if this were deployed throughout the entire city, what would that cost look like? Was it $10,000 per square mile? Is that correct? Okay.
No. It's, may I? So actually, and I don't want to sound like a salesperson here, but the price that you're being offered is significantly less than what we'd call the sticker price where Springfield is paying. The company made a decision. Yeah, I know.
They're under negotiation.
I won't even talk.
No, they know why we're doing this.
Just don't give us the Springfield price.
No,
Well-
you don't want this.
And even Springfield is below sticker because they have some loyalty credit there as well. They've been with us since 2008. So currently, the sticker price, if you will, is $70,000 per square mile. And that includes, let me go back here, $70,000 per square mile per year. There's a service initiation fee of $10,000 per square mile and a training cost of $10,000. So let's say you did 3 square miles, that'd be $210 as a subscription, $250 the first year, $210 thereafter. However, the company made a decision, as I said, just before COVID, a few years ago, to engage the smaller communities because a fixed price obviously has a higher percentage impact on smaller budgets. And we realized that cities like Holyoke may have the same per capita violence rate as a city like Springfield. So how can we engage the smaller communities equitably? And the CEO, Ralph Clark, made a determination to offer what we call a lower tier. Now that tiering is based on 50,000 population or less, and you meet that, or 100 sworn or less. Just the 50,000 population, obviously you meet, because according to my research, you have about 38,000 according to the 2020 census. Right. So you're well within that lower tier. This allows us to give you a much more favorable subscription price of $49,500. That includes the service initiation. We waive that. That includes the training costs. We waive that. We still give you the same quality training, the same level of service. Everything else that Springfield is getting, you're getting, but you're paying a fraction of the price that larger cities would be paying if they were starting with us in 2022. So it's $5.60 per hour per mile if you take 49,500 divided by the number of hours in a year. I don't know of any other public safety expense that gives you the same value as $5.60 an hour. And if you do the 2 miles that the sergeant talked about, we're looking at $11.20 per hour to maintain immediate notification of gunfire activity, to position the police department to save lives, solve those crimes, engage the community, and give the community a sense of trust and a sense of safety that they're not feeling today.
I definitely appreciate that piece of it. I guess I'm just wondering, I know folks have said that there's a cost restriction to doing it throughout the entire city, but folks have also said, you know, the loss of life is, you know, priceless, which is true. So I'm curious what, if you guys have an estimate, math is not my strong suit, if you have an estimate of what it would cost to cover the entire city.
This is Sergeant Virouette. Again, I'm not trying to get involved in the negotiations between you and the department, but I would say with our experience in Springfield, we started with 3 square miles. And after we started with 3 square miles, we found out that the system was effective. And yes, we had to go on the same type of data initially. We found out that there was a specific area of the city that we were having more gun violence than other areas, so we deployed. Once we deployed, we figured out that we definitely wanted to expand into other neighborhoods, and so on, to the point where this year we're going to be up to 9 square miles. How we figured out we would pay for it, and again, I can't say the same thing for Holyoke and Springfield will apply, and we're definitely paying $70,000 for this next 1 square mile because I just got the proposal from our regional rep. Was we reached out to the community with our next 3 square miles. When we could prove with the data that this initial 3 square miles was working and helping us as a police department and making it safer, and we were finding the evidence and finding the people, we were able to go back into the community, and our initial next stage with the next 3 square miles that we purchased, we got Bay State Medical Center involved in the north side of the city. We got a bunch of private businesses involved, and we were able to get some JAG fund granting that came in, which is federal granting money that helped us supplement some of it, and that's how we began our expansion. We've even expanded to other parts of the city where we've seen spikes, and the violence tends to shift between neighborhoods, which I think is probably one of the biggest concerns with the 2 counselors that mentioned it. We even have coverage area where our mayor lives. I mean, we have coverage areas that we have picked throughout the city that don't necessarily always serve specifically black or brown communities, but given Springfield and Holyoke, the diversity of the communities, we've been able to expand to other neighborhoods that you would not even think that could have gun violence, but are finding out that once we do deploy and we find the funding sources, that the system was needed in those areas. But we did start with 3, and we eventually, at this point, by the end of this year, will be up to 9 square miles in our city. We did discover that there was absolutely areas of the city that are never going to need ShotSpotter. It just over time, the crime stats are going to detail what parts of the city are having the most activity. And unfortunately, the new generations that we're having and the amount of guns that are out there, yes, we can find out later that we have to adjust. That's why we now deploy these individual square miles to specific sections of the city.
Thank you. With the help of Councilor Jourdain, the chair is going to recognize Mayor Garcia.
Mayor?
Yeah, I just want to add, so in the discussion on...
I can't hear him, sorry.
Hang on.
Sorry about that.
We got him.
In the discussion on the funding strategy to sustain, currently we have in front of us a grant from the federal government to fund 1 square mile. Our strategy to supplement the second square mile currently is using ARPA monies so that we don't have to use through taxation or appropriation. The original plan currently, and I want to share this for discussion phase, I'd be more than happy to, and I'll explain why. The current plan at the moment is to do this for 2 years with these dollars and evaluate the effectiveness of the program. Considering where 80% of the shots are being reported, that's what's in front of you currently. However, I do wholeheartedly understand and completely sympathize in, we don't want to target areas, black-brown community conversation. Holyoke's much more compact than Springfield. We have a little bit more flexibility at the moment, and because of this alternative revenue source, if we're going to be exploring this for the next 2 years to determine how we want to arrange ourselves every year thereafter, I don't mind supporting this and covering the whole city. 3 square miles. Looking at the map, 2 square miles is a pretty big chunk of our 4 census tract, including up in the Northampton Street area.
There's 21 square miles in Holyoke, just for the record. So just so we're all crystal clear, I mean, I don't know, Mount Tom, I don't know.
Yeah, of population, it's a little less.
I would imagine. So when, I want to make sure when we say we're covering all of Holyoke,
Point well taken. The density, the areas. So we're talking about neighborhoods and
exactly
and Homestead area where shots have.
We're
been
injecting
fired.
some reason into this. We're covering all of Holyoke. That if you did 2 or 3 miles, that
maybe
is.
It's,
yeah.
It would be $1.4 million to cover the.
Yeah, exactly.
I apologize. Point well taken. Wherever the shots are being reported. So wherever 100% the shots, because I'm pretty confident it's not all over the city.
Right. Agreed.
If we can take a look at that and see what we're able to achieve using these funding sources of it, great. I'm all for it. But the reality of the situation is, and I get the arguments, and I sit at every table and I listen to the concerns, is that we're all very concerned and want to support as much public safety as possible for everybody. So considering the data and what we're trying to do, another tool in the toolbox, we have 2 years to evaluate the effectiveness before we start baking into our normal appropriation budget. Yep. And suppose we do 4 square miles. We look at the data and really and realize that, hey, it's really this 2 square mile area in that budget moving forward. We can pivot from there. But the grant, with or without it, I'm going to support it via ARPA. So the question in front of you is not whether or not you support the program. It's whether or not to accept the grant. The grant's only going to supplement us defraying the cost from other revenue sources available to us. If the concern is targeting an area, I'd be more than happy to work with the folks and look at and expand that a little more to be sure that we're getting as much of the reports of shots fired, getting as much of those areas under this, watch for the next 2 years as possible. But the interesting opportunity we have here is to implement this, evaluate, and then determine if whether or not we want to turn off the switch and move forward if it doesn't work.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I can appreciate that there's a grant and that we need to do something, and I recognize that, and I recognize that the map that was shown was 80%, but there's still 20% of shots that, in areas that are not being covered. So obviously I'm not suggesting that we have it cover Mount Tom, but there are other places in the city that I think it's important to, and I think when we are focusing our efforts on just certain parts of the city, it can actually has the potential, in my opinion, to perpetuate a myth of, where the dangerous parts of the city are. So I guess, that's just something I'm being really, really mindful of. And in my research, I've also just seen recently, as recent as July 2022, the city of Chicago is being sued as a result of this technology. And so we were having a similar conversation earlier this evening about just covering all our bases and making sure we're not setting ourselves up for any liability. And so, I hope that when this gets employed, we can, maybe it's something that gets incorporated into the audit, is like, what are the best practices with this technology that is, makes sense in Holyoke, so that we are not opening ourselves up to liability. And I guess I have one last question. Maybe it's for the officer from Springfield, I'm not sure, or maybe it's for the spot shatter. How often, if you have this information, it doesn't have to be right now, it could be later, but do you know how often the spot shatter alerts actually result in evidence that like a gun-related crime actually occurred? Is that something you guys are able to track?
So we track 100% of every shooting incident because we tied in, as part of our policy, we tied in ShotSpotter into our calls for service. So we generate call numbers, and as part of our policy, we generate a report for every call that we go to that generates evidence, a shooting victim, some sort of a crime. That being said, I currently do all of the FOIA, not FOIA, but the court requests for ShotSpotter. I've been doing it for about 10 years, and I can reassure you that it's something that in Hampden County is highly respected and accepted. I am familiar with some of the stories like in Chicago and some of the ADAs that have gone public because of the fact that the ShotSpotter information either wasn't properly used or inaccurately used, which caused them to lose some cases. But in our experience and our history of using it in Springfield, we've been very careful. Obviously, policy is key, and using past practices from other departments, and obviously us teaching other departments how to use it specifically the way that it's recommended, follow the science. I do maybe 4 or 5 requests a week for court. The ADAs and the defense attorneys, even if the shooting, and it's something that we don't like to talk about, coverage areas, we don't like to specifically publicly tell the city of Springfield there's no coverage area in this area or in the other, because the psychological impact of ShotSpotter in our city since '08 is that we have ShotSpotter in the whole entire city of Springfield. We do not, because we don't own the system, are legally by FOIA required to provide specific details into the coverage area because we're buying a subscription from ShotSpotter. It's one of the things they did with their company about 10 years ago that helped the public safety realm from being sued and being required to provide certain information. It's technology that's owned by ShotSpotter. It's technology that they deploy, just like Verizon deploys their cell phone devices, just like the Eversource companies deploy their devices to provide power and gas. And whenever an issue comes up with coverage, hey, how many sensors do you guys have in Springfield? How much coverage do you have in Springfield? We simply are able to defer that legally, and it's been proven in one court system after another across the country. We defer our defense attorneys and our district attorneys with those type of legal questions to ShotSpotter, and they take care of the FOIAs. But as far as requests for court, I can say that it's really cut and dry. A shooting occurs in our city, right off the bat, we arrest somebody for a shooting, or a murder occurs, the very either next day or a couple days later, I'm getting requests from defense attorneys and from attorneys, hey, where's the ShotSpotter report? And then I have to respond that there isn't one, because I don't want to tell them that we don't have coverage in that area. And I'm legally covered in that nature, and I've been doing it for 10 years, and I would say that given any wood that's here, we've been pretty lucky and not having any major cases fall apart or lose because of using ShotSpotter. I hope that helps with your question.
Thank you very much, yes.
Thank you, Counselor. And if I could just weigh in real quick. Appreciate the presentation here this evening. One story, and this is some years back when my daughters were younger. I was driving them to our church for CCD classes early evening on a Sunday. And as I was right around the whole donut and the end of 391 coming in from the Springfield area, I heard what I thought at first was fireworks. And I said, there's something wrong. And as I passed through the lights on High Street, before I hit Jackson Street, I immediately saw three individuals running out of a tenement, out of a building, out of a house actually, across into a tenement and across the street. And I knew something was wrong. I got my daughters to church without any incident, and I doubled back around and realized I wasn't hearing fireworks. And I, for the first time in my life, understood the gunfire in a neighborhood, what it sounds like. And the trauma, Chief, that you talked about was, as a dad, was instantaneously part of, in my memory and will always be in my memory. I appreciate the counselors talking about these 2 square miles. It's Wards 1 almost entirely, Wards 2 a good portion of it, and a part of Ward 4. I think statistics will tell us low income wise, high percentage low income. It's, however, a population of maybe 6,500 to 7,000 in terms of families, in terms of and voters, especially in terms of what our census tells us. And we know our population in Holyoke is well over 50% brown skinned, and certainly is a diverse city in every neighborhood within the city itself. I think the stats tell us that this is where you start. This is where we're hearing the gunfire. And I work in the Holyoke District Court as a probation officer. This is where we see drug trafficking, drug trade, and all our drug-related crimes themselves. Because when they come off the highway to sell their drugs, they want places to go where they're inconspicuous, neighborhoods that maybe run down, areas that they can use, vacant buildings, and areas that they can be part of the drug trafficking trade itself. So it makes sense to me, although I would love to see affordability will always be a question, but down the road, love to see the expansion if it so merits it as we go on. But that's, I appreciate the presentation this evening. The technology is a big part about this. Mayor, thank you for sharing your plan on the affordability and the financing of it, and I certainly support the proposal here in Holyoke to get it off the ground and to see if it is something that can work for Holyoke in the future. Councilor Jordan.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I just want to also second your comments. First thing I think we should point out is you put solutions where problems are. That's why you've identified this 2 square miles versus some other 2 square miles in town. Would you put something that's covering the 80% of the problem or the 20% of the problem? I mean, it's just common sense, right? So the residents in those areas expect us to do whatever we can to keep them as reasonably safe as we can. It would seem to me that we're trying to come up with new solutions, and I commend the mayor and the police department for trying to bring in new solutions to plaguing old problems. It's really just this conversation has highlighted to me unbelievably, and I'm interested to see the statistical reports down the road when we implement this, that how many shots, incidents do we have? And it's a scary prospect for our community, and we have to really consider this. This is hugely risky behavior. And I know myself as a gun owner, a very proud gun owner, by the way, very strong supporter of the Second Amendment here, for sure. Anybody who knows me knows my position on Second Amendment. There is nothing I abhor more than is unlawful gun conduct and people that aren't licensed or not doing the right thing with guns. And those people need to be put in prison with the harshest sentences possible as far as I'm concerned, because you're going around risking other people's lives, besides the obvious intended victim, which is in and of itself a crime. You're shooting these people, usually related to criminal activity. But also, how many times do we hear these horror stories about the innocent child that gets caught in the crossfire, or some poor guy mowing his lawn that gets shot by a bullet going down, wherever. We've got to make sure that we're doing whatever we can to bring and get the word out there that we're putting all the tools possible to catch criminal activity in this community. Holyoke, like Springfield, has a reputation issue relative to crime, and we have to take this very, very serious. These type of things, cleanliness and crime, are basic qualities of life that the people in these neighborhoods are counting on us to do whatever we can to support them. And if we can respond to the other 80% of the calls, or maybe more, with a level of effectiveness, this has got to be worth a try, at a minimum, it seems to me. And I like the mayor's approach of giving this an evaluation period of 2 years to see if this moves the needle. And we're counting on our law enforcement to do this. And I appreciate Sergeant Verrett coming in and taking of his time to do this for us. This is what we're trying to do, is capture best practices in other communities, and to see that they have actually tripled their expanded area is encouraging. So, we owe this to the residents to make these attempts to keep them safe and to catch criminals in this community and keep them safe and save lives, right? It's just this one person that you said nobody ever called for, this poor guy that got shot, and he's laying behind a house somewhere. If it wasn't for ShotSpotter, that guy might die, or somebody like him might die. What is that worth here? I surely would want the police to come if I got shot, or somebody, any of our other constituents. So I am impressed by the presentation. This is exactly what, and I know Sergeant Hart might have been a little frustrated that we tabled this, I don't know, at the last meeting, but I wanted this because otherwise it was just, here comes the police asking for 60 grand and whatever to spend on something. To put the meat on this presentation and to have the sergeant from Springfield and to put this level of detail helps us to explain this important thing. And hopefully here in Holyoke, we will put the word out so that criminals who would dare shoot a gun illegal at somebody else, we're watching you, we've got a new tool in the toolbox, and we're coming for you, okay? And we're gonna drive you the hell out of Holyoke. That's the intent here, and that's how we're gonna keep residents safe. So thank you for doing this and being proactive. Appreciate it. Certainly has my support.
Thank you, Counselor. I believe that ends our presentation, seeing no hands raised.
I'll make a motion that it be adopted.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded that we adopt and recommend the adoption of accepting the grant to the full City Council tomorrow evening. If there's no further discussion, roll call. Counselor Jordan?
Yes.
Counselor Tallman?
Yes.
Counselor McGivern, yes. Passes 3-0-1. Gentlemen, thank you. Sergeant Red, thank you for coming to Holyoke.
Thank you.
You're welcome anytime. Tell Don I said hi, though, will you?
I will.
Thank you.
Very nice meeting you. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Story about Notre Dame?
Thanks, Chief.
Thank you, Sergeant. Sergeant, thank you for coming. Very much appreciate it.
Ron, I have one more item.
Moving on quickly so we can take care of Sergeant Hart, item number 5.
Motion to take that off the
Motion to take number 5
table.
off the table.
Motion
Second.
is second to take 5 off the table. All those in favor? Any opposed? This is a request from the Chief of Police and the Mayor to transfer from the line item known as patrol officers, $150,000 into the line item overtime. It's off the table for discussion. Sergeant Hart, I think you know the drill.
Yes, so kind of near the end of our $250,000 budgeted. Right now, after this next pay period, which is Thursday, we'll have a balance of approximately $46,000. So, to date, we spent 203, and that's an average of 5 pay periods of approximately 40,000 a pay period. So, just similar to last year, we're trying to come in with around a quarter, each quarter to come in with additional funding. This funding is coming strictly from patrolman line item, just mainly due because of grant funding as well as staff shortages for those positions. So that's where the funding's coming from. And when we're going to be back again, we can't tell. But, as you know, last year we spent a little over 900,000. Each year we've been decreasing our overtime funding. So this time it's really cutting short, just because of the way the council is meeting and the time we need new funding or additional funding for this overtime budget. But that's our request, 150,000.
John, if I could, real quick, on the average per pay period, 40,000 would be up a little, or are you just ballparking that?
I kind of average 40.6.
Okay, because it was 38, and I think the last time Chief
Yeah,
Pat was
right.
here, it was even down a little below 38.
Right, and we are down.
What is our
a lot more
staffing?
officers, that's why.
I was going to say, what is our staffing level? Do you know?
So right now, I'm not too sure exactly of the amount of officers we have. I know we have 2 that'll be coming back to us from the academy, and we have 7 new recruits going out in October to the academy.
And of the ordinance, I think, is 96, but Mayor, I think the budget was...
No, the budget was for...
92, I believe, in the budget.
92, right.
Of the 92, how many are filled or not filled?
I think we might be at around 84.
Wow. That's big. How officers filled, any vacancies?
There's 2 vacancies currently. Or is there one? No, one vacancy, a lieutenant position.
In the grants, I lost it. Safer grant? No, not the Safer
No,
grant.
it's
The
fire.
which grants would have the bigger impact?
All the grants that, for patrolmen are a lot of our substance abuse grants, our crisis intervention grants, our elder affair grants. Those are all salaries that come from those grants that we use to put into the overtime budget.
Okay. Councilor Drain?
I'll defer to the mayor if that's okay,
Oh,
Joe.
Mayor Garcia. Always.
And I got a brief update here. So our police department's currently at 82 patrol officers. 7 new officers are getting ready to go to the academy in October. 1 officer who had left to work elsewhere is coming back. Another officer there's a lateral transfer from another district coming over. And 1 other officer will be coming from reserve if certified. So if all goes as planned, we should be up to 92 officers, I don't know, after the academy is done.
October, once those 7 go to the academy.
Right, I think that's the and this was from an August 5th update. I'm sure there's another update beyond that, because it's always changing depending on, somebody retires or whatever the case may be.
Well, Mayor, you feel that there's 150,000 extra? Because what's the when we calculate, I'd have to go back to my line item. I did not bring the budget document itself with me, but if 92 positions, that's based on 92 times the base salary of a patrolman. I mean, that's like 3 jobs right there almost, right? 150,000?
Right.
You think you've got an extra 3 full-time positions we're going to remove out of here if we vote to approve this? you're going to be okay?
Well, we have 3 full-time positions that are covered on grants, so those would cover that.
Okay. And we started the year with how much? 225 or 250?
250.
250. So now we'll give you 400, and this is going to cover us till when? I mean, today's August 31st. We're 2 months into the fiscal year, and we're already through 250 grand.
This is very similar to what we did last year. And so you got to kind of figure what's the average, you know?
Well, last year was 900,000 about for overtime. This would be faster than that. This would be over $1 million, right? Because
If we
40,000.
Right, if we stay at this 40,000.
Correct, yes.
But that's because of we're understaffed. So I think if we get to that 92, I think we're gonna.
We'll slow down.
John, I think you also
Down
factor
and-
in your summer vacation schedule?
Yes, we're almost finished that, so.
Right, no, but that has an impact on the
The burn
first
rate.
quarter.
Right now, right, yeah, because these first 5 pay periods have been, in the 40s, and so that's been,
You did the math on this, Mayor? You're good with the 400 at this point, or?
That 400 is going to cover them for right now to get them through. There's no question. I did ask the chief, why not cast a wider net here and get more. What are we with July, August? We're in August now. It's only been 2 months. So the chief was refraining from drawing too much, understanding that there hasn't been enough of a surplus to, so that was it. So he just drew enough to get him through a few more months. And this, I guess, this for the years is the game that's been played.
Yeah.
With trying to, it's a moving target that everyone's trying to meet. But the key thing that we need to focus on is getting these positions filled.
Yeah.
And making sure that we have 100% of our supervisory positions all active and filled, away from whatever active duty might be going on or injured on duty or whatever the case may be. While also getting through this police audit to understand further what are some of the other additional structural issues we might not be seeing, so that we can better understand and pivot in areas where we need to improve our position in the police department.
Right.
Right now, being at 82, from what I understand, what we're funding currently is patrol to respond to calls. And when folks are out or covering for positions or special projects, I know we have a lot of traffic violation concerns that have been discussed in this body. And when the officers are responding to calls, there's not enough time to respond to a vehicle that's not parked correctly or whatever the case may be. But we start putting attention to that. Now you're talking about special projects. We're pulling officers away from regular patrol responding to calls to do what are other special, I guess you can call them detail work. So it's this puzzle that we're always fighting with. We got to get these positions filled and also continue to understand what else is going on in there in the police department that's just that's causing these gaps, these service gaps in the budget.
Exactly. And is one of the things that they're going to look at as they're doing a dive onto the overtime usage, what function doesn't really require a cop to do?
Yep.
That we're paying overtime, right? So is there a much cheaper civilian service, that could be, whether it's the analyst or the, the grant writer or these type of things that we're looking at, so that we have cops doing police work and we have civilians doing civilian work, right? Administrative function.
So we want to understand what are the best practices out there, that looking at our operations the way that it exists and understanding what other best practices might be going on in other police departments that are meeting the need that we're just missing the target on. I just recently signed a contract. I'll forward to the council through the council president, maybe just send communication on the project proposal, what's going to be looked at. I did also speak with the consultant briefly to also include in there interviewing members of the council as well to seek feedback in that process. So in that proposal, it's pretty detailed in what they'll be looking at,
All right.
Counselor, and I'm sure you'll appreciate understanding what's going to be involved in this process. But this is a critical piece in our further quest to improve services at the police department,
Right.
and achieve a level of effectiveness, efficiencies, and understand what is it we're doing wrong and where can we be better. So, but while we do that, at the same time, we do this, right?
Yeah,
We look at where the need is and we fund it, and we see the budget shortfall and we have to come back and ask for more overtime money and
Right.
play this game. So.
All right. All right, I'll make a motion that it be approved. It is consistent with the past usage pretty closely, so we'll see where it takes us, right, John?
Yeah, and I just want to say that, you know, kind of the main idea that the chief is looking at is to not kind of come in and ask for a big, huge sum of money and give the impression that, you know, oh, now we got this money, we can do whatever we want. So we want to do with what we feel we can stay within our means for each quarter and try and stay, our goal is obviously to reduce the total amount that we spent last year, as we've been doing each and every year.
Right.
So that's our goal for the end of the year.
Good.
Sergeant, there's nothing in history that would make us think like that.
Of course, projection.
Chair, heard a motion?
Yes, the motion to approve.
And seconded by Counselor Tomlin. Roll call, Counselor Jordan?
Yes.
Counselor Tomlin?
Yes.
Counselor McGivern, yes, passes 301. Sergeant, thank you. As always, appreciate it. That
Thank
was a
you,
great
John.
presentation this evening, and
Yeah,
thank you for
appreciate
everything.
that.
And I'm glad you asked for that, because that, just
Good.
reminds me to maybe do more.
Yeah, it's that type of detail is very helpful.
So the thing is, we've been doing, we have that presentation like 4 times with different mayors that we try to present it to.
Oh, you finally got a guy who's paying attention over here. He gets an A+ for effort, I'll tell you.
and someone who's got
I've
a-
never seen a mayor at all these meetings.
Someone who's got
It's
a bigger
awesome.
checkbook than any mayor's ever had.
That's it. I know. He's got all the money, though. All these other mayors were broke. So this guy's all set. We're going to get him another desk in here. It's unbelievable.
I heard a motion.
Motion to take item
takes
6 off the table?
second.
Motion made and seconded to take item 6, which is to use $2,017,526.96 of ARPA money revenue for revenue loss as a funding source for the fiscal 2023 budget. Take off the table. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved.
Motion to approve.
Motion made and seconded to approve. The auditor is with us, the mayor's with us.
I don't.
This is on the recap sheet. I think we understand it, but is the mayor or anybody want to make a presentation?
I can say, if it's helpful to you, I mean, I could save your breath. I mean, we already knew this in the budget. This number has been disclosed to us for quite a long time ago. This is just, I think, a perfunctory formality. I mean,
It
you're
is,
welcome.
Councilor Jordan. I just want the listening audience to make sure they understand that we understand what we're doing.
Okay, yeah. No, it's that's very good, Mr. Chairman. I agree with you. But in support of this, I would just say that, you know, the bigger, tougher challenge will be when we don't have these funds anymore. What do we do with the structural deficit? Because we had $1.7 million last year, $2 million this year, and then, you know, thank heavens Washington is throwing the money around to all these communities in the country to do this type of thing. But, you know, we need to really be as proactive as possible to make sure that, you know, we're not back in the soup again when these type of $2 million a year gifts go away. Because this is just luck is how we ran into these.
A
So.
quick question to the auditor, and just for everybody so we understand it. We have a 8.5, 9-page attached detailed of the accounts that have qualified for a revenue loss. Is that correct?
That is correct.
You want to read them one by one?
No,
I didn't think so.
thank you.
But they are available for anybody who wishes to see them. Is there any discussion? If not, the chair will entertain a motion.
Motion to approve?
Motion made second to approve the request of ARPA money revenue transfer for revenue loss funding as a source for this year's budget. Roll call, Councilor Jordan,
Yes.
Councilor Tallman,
Yes.
Councilor McGivern, yes, passes 301.
Motion to remove item 7 from the table?
Motion made second to remove item 7 from the table. All those in favor? Any
Aye.
opposed? This is in response to, I believe, Councilor Jordan's order, but from the treasurer and auditor, it is a listing of the most recent statements showing the balance of all stabilization accounts. Off the table for discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? Tanya, I believe you're sitting in for the treasurer this evening? Or, I'm sorry, our treasurer is with us this evening.
Oh,
I
no.
apologize. Sharon, welcome. It's Joe
Yeah, thank you
McGivern
so
and
much.
Councilor Jordan and Councilor Tallman's on Zoom. And we appreciate
Very
these
good.
statements. Would you like to run us through these, or the auditor? I know the mayor's busy out here.
Well, I can start, and Tanya can definitely chime in or help out if I miss anything. My understanding that the request came based on the desire to transfer $1 million from the capital stabilization account, or into the capital stabilization account from the stabilization account that we have with Flynn Financial. So I did send over the statement as of June 30th showing the two stabilization accounts. The balance together is actually what makes up the entire stabilization account. I reached out to Flynn Financial, and it is divided into two accounts because they wanted to track the first account that they had, I guess, started years ago, and then the second account was transferred over under John Lumbra's administration, I believe, and they just wanted to keep it separate to be able to track the progress and the performance separately. And since then, when I got this request, I was kind of surprised that all I had was access to the June 30th account. So since then, I have reached out to them, and I do have online access now, so I can give updated information much easier and quicker, and more up-to-date information. So the treasurer that comes on after me will be able to provide that information as well.
Can I go, Joe?
Councilor Jordan.
Yeah, thank you. Sharon, very nice. Kevin Jordan, by the way, very nice to meet you. Thank you for pinch hitting for us and being our treasurer. We really appreciate your efforts on our behalf. Can you go over the point you made about why we have two stabilization accounts instead of one?
Yeah, so when I came on, we had met with Tim Flynn Financial, and he said that there was two separate reasons. They are invested differently, that's my understanding, and like I said, they wanted to track the two accounts separately because one, they had started with the city years and years ago. I don't know the exact date of that. And then the second one was that, so the second one is the one that has the balance of a little over $5 million. That one was just transferred over under John Lumbra's administration, but I don't have any details handy to say where it was before that or how it got transferred, but I can definitely look into that if you would like more information as far as that goes.
Yeah, I'm curious to learn. How about this? Could you, now that you have access and you can kind of dive into this a bit, I would be interested to learn about how these accounts are invested, especially if there's a different investment strategy, one versus the other, because I'm assuming we have rules on the types of investments that we're allowed to use for these type of things, because obviously we assume this is cash or cash equivalents, right? Like this is stuff sitting in almost like money market level, or is it really investing in bonds? Or I'll be interested to see what's drawing the interest here, and how these are invested. By the way, just so you know, the photocopy that came across to us is not the greatest photocopy version in the world. It's kind of difficult to read. So if you could send us this statement and, you know, if there's any background detail via email to the counselors, that would be super helpful.
Absolutely.
So we now have the Cannabis Impact Stabilization Account, which we learned tonight has about $3.5 million in it. If you could get us a statement on that and how that's invested. And then we have now the capital stabilization, which we did, which now has $1 million in it. And now we have this too, which, if I'm to understand this correctly, we've got 11.2 plus 15.8. Is that to say that we have, oh no, that was in January, but now it looks like the balances have gone down somewhat.
So the balances as of today, I printed out a statement today. So the Holyoke Stabilization 1, which was a little over 10 million on the statement that you received from June, is now down to 9.8 million and change, largely because we did transfer $1 million from that into the capital stabilization account. Then the stabilization number 2 account, which was 5.2 million on the statement you received, is 5.1 right now.
Okay, so we're, all right, so we have 10.6 as of, this is June 30th, 2022, 10.6 and 1 and 5 million, so we're about 15, we'll just call that 15.7 million. And now we're minus 1 from that because we put $1 million in the capital stabilization?
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
And then, of course, there's fluctuations in market value as well, so.
Which I want to talk to you about right now. That's kind of where I'm going. Okay, so $1 million, and then we have the cannabis is $3.5 million, and we have this, which is 15.7 minus 1 is 14.7 million. So we're 14, 15, 19.2. Yeah. As of June 30th or thereabouts, it would have been 19.2 then between the three of them.
As of,
that would have been cannabis, 3.5 million, capital 1 million, and then we would have had 14.7 in the regular traditional stabilization. Is that
yeah, I mean,
approximate?
if you're going by today, the capital stabilization is 14.9.
14.9, okay.
Yeah, because it's 9.8 in one and 5.1 in the other. I mean, those are rounding figures, but that's about it.
Okay, so,
Yep.
all right. So we're, between all of it, it's around around $19 million. That's not a bad thing. But now the question is, these market fluctuations. Tell us a bit, and again, you're new. What is your experience with how we have these invested, who we have it invested with?
Yeah, so like I said, my experience is very surface level at this point. I just kind of got access. I literally just got online access to this, I think on Thursday or Friday last week.
Okay.
But I mean, I can definitely get you more information as far as, you know, the change in value from one year to the next, if that is something you are interested in. I have access to the asset allocations for each fund. I can tell you what percentage is in bonds, what percentage is in stocks and things like that. I don't have that right in front of me, so I don't want to misspeak and give you any incorrect information by any means.
That's interesting because I don't know if it's common knowledge around here that we're investing in the stabilization fund in the stock market. I didn't realize that. I got to say. Of course, we never get financial statements. All we see is the number. So that would be helpful. So maybe we need to, and obviously stock market, not doing too great this year. So that would tend to explain why we're $1 million, $1.7 million down year to date. Well, matter of fact, $2.5 million down year to date. So,
Yeah,
okay.
and-
Yeah, so if you
yeah.
could give us a financial statement, going back, say, 3 years, because we want to be fair, and obviously stock market goes up some years, goes down some years. And then do we have a fund manager that's doing the investing, like that we're paying a fee to do these investments?
Yeah, Flynn Financial is the manager of the fund. And they also did send a July allocation and performance report. So the combined accounts were up 3.54% for the period. So, it is kind of an up and down thing. But I can definitely research that for you and get you some more concrete numbers.
Yeah, we might have to, can you get the name of the person at Flynn Financial, and maybe we can arrange to have you, Sharon, and the person from Flynn Financial come in and make a presentation to the city council? I don't think we've ever had, I've never met anybody. Joe, have you ever met anybody from Flynn Financial? No. So I think it would be good to get to know them and have them make a presentation about what they're doing with our money.
Yeah, absolutely. They're very accessible and they're very responsive, and I found them to be very helpful and patient
Great.
with me as I'm trying to learn the ropes and get access to the accounts to make it easier going forward. So I'm sure that won't be a problem.
Good. Do we go out to bid or what for their services, or is that something just picked by the treasurer?
That I'm not sure about that. I don't know
Okay.
if Tanya knows the history of that or not, but that's not something that I'm aware of.
Tanya, are you familiar with Flynn Financial? Is Tanya still with us or no?
I am with you, and I'm not really familiar with Flynn Financial, but what I can say is that it is part of the treasurer's responsibilities to invest the stabilization funding. It's part of their responsibilities.
Okay. Yep. All right. So we'll get to know more about Flynn Financial, and maybe I would say a 3-year, because I want to be fair. Last year the stock market for 2020 started obviously with COVID, was way down, then it went way up, and then 21 was pretty good. 22 not so much. So we'll see how this is going, and then just get the policy question of, is this a good thing? Do we? I'd like to hear from Flynn Financial that. How is this really being invested, and what does the law allow for investments? Are we allowed to take tax money and play it in the stock market? I don't know. We should find that out. I just hope we don't invest in Enron, but we'll find. I'm sure how do they pick and how do they know who isn't the next Enron? But I thought there were rules on how we invest public funds. I didn't realize you could invest it in the stock market, but I guess we'll find out. I know the pension fund has those type of investments, but that's considered a very, very long term. Whereas these dollars, we theoretically, the mayor or the city council on any given day could ask you for a check for all $17 million, and you would have to pull it out of that account and be immediately available to us. That is a question, is do we actually have true access to that? Not to say I'm recommending we would ever do that, but that's one of the reasons why you have to be very conservatively invested, is due to the fact that this money is, it's like money in the bank. It's got to be immediately available to draw on. So we'll learn more. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Appreciate the report.
I'll do my best to get the information that you need. Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Sharon. Have a good
Thank
evening.
you.
Is there
Thank you,
any
Tim.
further discussion?
All right, I'll make a motion that this has been complied with, Mr. Chairman? Or do you think that we could use this as a vehicle to have the presentation? What do you think?
I'd like to see,
Want me to do a separate order?
yeah, because I'd like to see all the accounts,
Yeah.
the capitalization and the,
Yeah, that's a good, maybe you and I can file something?
Yes.
Okay. All right, I'll make a motion. This has been complied with, and myself and the chairman will file a separate order.
motion made. And motion seconded. We can do this.
All right.
Counselor Bacon, can you fill in for a second?
Oh, second.
Counselor Tallman.
I think I was on mute. You could put me on that order too.
No problem, Peter, thank
Oh,
you.
good, Pete, we'll add you to that, yeah.
Quick,
I'm here in case.
quick roll call. Counselor Jordan.
Yes.
Counselor Tallman. Counselor
Yes.
McGivern. Yes. Passes 301. We have one more motion. We're going to do it real quick. Item 8 here is only here for disposal. It was actually a duplicate as determined by the auditor and the city clerk, and we just have to, we put it in committee because we weren't sure at the last meeting, but we've already voted on this, this number, this grant, and we just have to return it to the auditor.
Yeah, I'll make a motion that item 8 be returned to the auditor.
Motion
Second.
made and seconded, return to the auditor. Roll call, Counselor Jordan.
Yes.
Counselor Tallman. Counselor
Yes.
McGivern. Yes, 301. Thank you, everybody. There's one more motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion made and seconded to adjourn. Jordan, Tallman, McGivern. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. We stand adjourned. Everybody, good job.
Have a good
Thank you,
evening.
Mayor.
Good night.
Bye.
As always.
Good night.
Good night, Counselor Bacon.